the Capital Wasteland, poisoned by radiation, overrun with super mutants, and humanity trying to live their best life. I will be exploring all 163 locations in Fallout 3, from the vaults, to the settlements, to the landmarks. This is going to be a long one. This vault can be located in the center of the Capital Wasteland, and this is where you, the main character, grew up in to learn the ropes of being a child.
You are quite the little explorer, aren't you?
But like many other vaults across America, this had a social experiment inside. This vault's purpose was to remain closed indefinitely, so its design included a huge amount of resources and equipment to last as long as possible. The first overseer told everyone that the outside world was dangerous and uninhabitable. And to be fair, this was back in 2077, so it was probably true. But later, other overseers took over and continued this same rhetoric for decades, until 2241, when a new overseer sent out a scout party to check out the local areas. They were successful in finding a settlement nearby and built relations with them. But all of that progress would eventually fall apart when the new overseer came along and decided to shut everything down and go back to the old ways of strict isolation. As you grow up, you will see how the vault operates. You deal with bullies,
Daddy's girl, daddy.
Don't stop it!
answer questions with your own free will,
And to whom we owe everything we have, including our lives.
and eventually in 2277, your dad escapes from the vault during a radroach infestation incident. You then also leave the vault in order to search for him, and thus begins our exploration of the Capital Wasteland. Man, that never gets old. The next time you return, Vault 101 will be at the brink of civil war, and depending on your actions, you can help either fix it or make it worse. Just right down the road is Springvale, a small suburban neighborhood where a few families lived before the war. If you search the homes, you can find a letter of acceptance into Vault 101, one example being the Gomez family, whose descendants you can see in the vault. As we know already, Vault 101 did have a scout party to explore Springvale, and they reported that the town was actually infested with giant ants. Luckily, that's not really a problem anymore, but you can see that they are still around. You can also find an iBot, specifically an Enclave iBot, broadcasting President Eden's propaganda. By the way, always loot this mailbox, it always has 3 grenades inside. The last point of interest of this area is a lonely house, where a woman called Silver lives in. She ran away from a town called Megaton because she owed someone money. And we can lie to her right off the bat for some extra caps, and in return we just tell the guy that she's long gone. So where is Megaton? Well, it's actually not too far from here, and it's considered one of the main hubs of the Capital Wasteland. You really gotta appreciate Megaton's design with that classic Fallout-esque style. You know, it's like a proper shanty town built from plain parts, and a grand entrance from when you first arrive. But it wasn't always like this. The earliest history of this place tells us that it began as a settlement where people worshipped a large undetonated bomb in the center of town. But it wasn't just a home for an atomic cult, it was also a place of refuge for settlers who tried to enter Vault 101 but were denied access. So they stayed nearby instead. But as the dust storms in the area got worse, more people sought refuge here. And over time, it grew from being centered around a cult into a functioning town, and eventually a major trading hub in the Capital Wasteland. But where prosperity grows, danger follows. Raiders began attacking Megaton to pillage it. The town of course survived, but it did receive some losses, and eventually the residents reinforced it with huge metal sheets from aircrafts and buses, turning it into the fortified settlement we see today. In the present day, Megaton is home to many residents, maybe just a bit too many, as the population keeps growing for its own good. The town's leader, Lucas Sims, acts as the sheriff, and as there's no real security, settlers just keep their weapons on them in case of any troublemakers. But back to the town itself, it is still heavily influenced by the cult-like beliefs called the Children of Atom, who worship the bomb in the middle of town, with Confessor Cromwell leading the church. Though, how is he not a ghoul yet? That is a question. There is, of course, a place to sleep, eat, drink, and a main trading hub called Craterside Supply, owned by one of the most annoying characters in the game. If you speak to her long enough, she'll tell you about the Wasteland survival guide that she's writing, and you can help her out with that. At the top of the town is Moriarty's Saloon, owned by a lovely Irish man called Colin Moriarty, and he seems to know where your father went. If you pay him 100 caps or deal as silver in Springvale, he will tell you where your father went.
He went southeast into DC to the Galaxy News radio station. Good luck now.
Inside Moriarty's Saloon, you can also meet a mysterious man named Mr. Burke, who wants the undetonated bomb destroyed on the behalf of Alistair Tenpenny, an old, evil British man who thinks Megaton is, in his words, an eyesore. Clearly this is the evil karma path if you decide to take it earlier on. The only thing I ask is just be nice to Gob, okay? He's going through a lot, alright? By the way, I'm sure many of us know, but you can actually escape from the Megaton map if you want to. It just takes a lot of parkour, but if you do it right, you are able to get to the guard as well. This is all legitimate, this isn't without any cheats, so you can do this on console or on PC.
How the hell did you get up here anyway?
Lastly, before we go, we can speak to Lucy West, who's worried about her brother in Arafu, not too far from here, and that will be one of our next stops. But before we go there is a few locations along the way, including Springvale School. This school has been taken over by a group of raiders, originally by a gang leader called Boppo. One day Boppo had a big brain idea to attack Megaton, and that's when Lucas Sims shot him right in the head. The raiders retreated after their failure and are now held up here. Funny thing is, if you actually read the terminals, the raider crew actually thought his idea was stupid, so they don't actually miss him at all. So with Megaton out of the picture, the raiders set their sights on Vault 101. And how did they plan to do that? By tunneling underground into the vault, of course. While it's clever in theory, their plan did unfortunately fall apart when a group of giant ants swarmed them. This is one of the better places for early game loot, so make sure to check it out. And don't use the Chinese pistol. Why was I using it? It's so bad. Once all the raiders have been dealt with, we can now move west, where we can actually find Vault 101's neighbouring vault, Vault 106.
Can I interest you in an extremely rare refractor?
This was, of course, another social experiment vault, where the residents of Vault 106 were exposed to a psychoactive drug that was pumped into the air supply. This was carried out under the Overseer's authority, with the researchers monitoring the long-term effects on the Vault's population, in hopes that this experiment will run many years. There is a cool personal theory that I have, where this Vault's idea actually came from Frederick Sinclair, as mentioned in the Fallout TV series, where he talks about a psychoactive substance being dispersed through the air.
What about using a vault to develop a super mutant soldier using illegal immigrants?
We could pump psychotropic drugs into the air supply.
And while that's not obviously confirmed, I could imagine one of the elites in the Fallout universe to think of this idea. But back to the experiment itself, it does turn out that it was far more dangerous than expected. The residents became erratic, paranoid, and aggressive. Many of them tried to escape the gas, but there was no real way of avoiding it. And over time, the vault was left with only a few insane survivors. The damage was unfortunately permanent, and the vault was left in ruins, which is why when you explore it, you start to hallucinate. You start to see visions of your father, a martyr, and even the tunnel snakes, like some sort of PTSD. The main areas of the vault include the entrance, the living quarters, where you too can enjoy some of the insanity that the vault dwellers experienced, and the science labs, where one of the surviving residences ambushes you with a stealth boy, kind of acting like the final boss of the area. The key item here is the science bobblehead, and there is multiple bobbleheads across the Capital Wasteland to collect. This will give you a nice one-up in your skills or your special skills, and this also includes several skill books that can be found, which also increases your skill points. There is also a mini nuke that can be found here, which goes to one of the most OP weapons in the game. There was some cut content from this vault, where in the early ideas, the devs wanted a bit more of an extreme hallucination effect, like the rooms flipping upside down, or corridors where the players would shrink, and even your father appearing as the final boss instead. And I think that would have been awesome to see. Once you leave the vault, nearby you can find Kaylin's bed and breakfast, a place that was used for travelers and guests to check out the lovely river, but unfortunately has now been turned into ruins with a couple of raiders loitering around the area. But nothing else really worth mentioning here. It looks pretty destroyed. As we reach an overpass, we will finally reach a small settlement of Arafu. This used to be a more populated settlement, but unfortunately it has been attacked numerous times. And because of that, most of the residences left to seek better shelters, such as Megaton, only leaving a handful of settlers left. You might notice that the town sign is missing a couple of letters. It originally was supposed to spell careful, but the C and L kind of fell off, which is how they ended up naming their town Arafu, or Arfu, whatever you want to call it. The first person that you meet is Evan King, an older gentleman a little bit paranoid and nearly kills you because he thinks that you're part of a gang.
Hang on, you're not one of them. I nearly blasted you in two.
This gang that he's worried about is called the Family, and they've been attacking the settlement here recently, harming some of the residences. And so he requests that you go and speak to these residences to make sure that everything is okay. You can find a woman named Karen Chenzi, who is a little bit mentally unstable.
Is this the mailman?
You have Evan King's house, which contains a repair bobblehead, so make sure to pick that up. And then you will come across a couple of corpses that looks like it's been pretty mangled. This is the members of Lucy West's family, but apparently the brother is missing. Evan asks you once again for help to investigate in the tunnels nearby to find the family, and finally settled a dispute between the family and Arafu.
There's all kinds of places they could be hiding, like Hamilton's Hideaway, the old Moonbeam Cinema, or Northwest Seneca Metro Station.
Which will lead us to our first metro system, Northwest Seneca Station. Now, I'm just going to say this right now, just so that I'm not like skipping anything or missing any detail. All of these stations are pretty similar. Train tracks, destroyed trains, and a bunch of metro tunnels. But unlike the caves in Oblivion, which is basically kind of the same over and over again, it does have a unique layout in every single one, with its own environmental storytelling. For example, this one has a Mirelurk trap, which goes off if you're not too careful. But at the entrance of this station, you can actually find two ghouls who are currently making Ultra Jet. Apparently the normal jet in the game just isn't enough for ghouls, so they have to like pump it up a little bit. But in order to make these, they need to have a bunch of sugar bombs. It's cereal, giving you a nice fetch quest if you ever come across any sugar bombs in your travels. If you keep on following the station tracks, you'll eventually bump into the Meresti station. This is where you can find the home of the family. It's a small underground settlement made up of people who believe they're suffering from a condition that gives them the cravings of blood and flesh, kinda similar to vampires. It is here that you can speak to their leader, Vance, about Lucy West's brother. The brother ended up with the family after he discovered that he likes the taste of humans, which is why his parents are on the floor. And that's when you discover he was the one that killed his parents. You can convince Vance to speak to him, and you can deliver him a letter from Lucy. And depending on how you want to go about the conversation, you can convince him to return back to Arafu. While you're here, you can also negotiate a deal between the family and Arafu, where if the family agrees to stop attacking the town will offer a bunch of blood packs. I'm just more curious about where they're going to get them from. There is a unique melee weapon if you want to pick it up called the Vampire's Edge, found in Vance's room. There's a skill book and a mini nuke if you want it. And just in case you didn't know, Meresti is actually a real place in Romania, near the Transylvania region. Ringing the bells? Leaving through the metro entrance, you will bump into a random encounter. This was my one. And we're now going to head east to find an isolated home. This place is pretty well hidden, considering there's a massive radio tower sticking out of it. Inside we can find a sweet elderly lady called Agatha. After her husband passed away, she doesn't really do much these days except to make music. This is where she asks you if you can go and find her a violin, but not just some ordinary violin, a very fancy one that is found in a vault in the Capital Wasteland. If you can find this violin, it will unlock a new radio station for you to listen to some beautiful classical music. It also looks like she gets special treatment because the main trading caravans do stop by here once a week to give her everything that she needs. Isn't that nice of them?
Good luck.
Not too far away from Agatha's house is the scrapyard. It's actually based on a real scrapyard in Maryland, which is also filled with wrecked cars and buses. But this isn't just some boring location. It actually holds 3 key things. The first one, of course, is dog meat. You'll find him fighting a couple of raiders, and if you decide to help him out if he needs it, you can recruit him as your companion. He is extremely tough and basically immortal, so you might as well take him. The second is the small shack locked by a key. This location is tied to the contract killer perk. With this perk, you can collect ears from good karma characters that you kill, and then you can sell them to this mysterious man named Daniel Littlehorn, who operates out of this shack. You can ask him why he needs these ears, but he won't tell you. He just tells you that he needs them. Also, it gives you a bit of a weird vibe here, like they're mind controlled or something.
Busy, so busy. Busy, busy bee.
Lastly, there's a small unmarked treasure tied to a note that you can find on a dead wastelander. The note mentions a hidden stash in the scrapyard, and if you can track it down, you'll be able to find a stash of comic books. Let's head back to Arafu to tell the old man about the peace deal. On the way, you can come across a ruined church, occupied by a group of super mutants. I was quite unfortunate to have one welding a minigun, so that was fun. And inside, you can find a captive wastelander, who you can free for some good karma. But the most important thing about this location is the Keller family holotape. These tapes tell a story about a family connected to a government bunker that the father stole from the government. And every family member has an access code number. To access the bunker, you will need to collect all 5 holotapes, which will give you the passcode. It's just a nice reward for players who enjoy exploring the wasteland. Further down the road, you can find Hamilton's hideaway. Inside, you'll find some wildlife and a few raiders who have made it their little home. Originally, the lore was meant to be around a family who made this their own private bomb shelter after their paranoia with Vault-Tec. I think they were probably onto something with that. However, that backstory was from cut content, and these terminal entries do not appear in the final game. From what's implied though, the shelter was never really completed, but after the war the hideout was used by chem smugglers, and later raiders took over. There is also a military cash stash, but you can't access it without doing 3 Dogs quest, which will be coming up very soon. Just outside of the hideaway is the outdoor cinema. There's not really much to note here, though I can believe there was some sad storytelling here with this skeleton and a teddy bear, which by the way is still intact. And then right next door is a baseball field. Here you can see some raiders playing, well, baseball. Somehow they know how to play it, as you can see them running around the pitch. It's good to see some raiders getting some exercise and being a little bit more civilized. Never mind. You can also find some super mutants nearby with a minigun, just avoid that. We don't need to deal with that. Which comes to our main settlement of the local area named Big Town. And as you can see, it's not exactly a big town. The name is partly a joke because the settlers here are former residences of Little Lamplight, a community made up of kids. So you know, big town for big people. When you enter, you are greeted by the town's only security guard, who is clearly worried about the attacks on the town as it's been happening a lot recently. You may notice that the people here are a little bit shorter than you, and that's because this place is mainly consisting of teenagers and young adults. The way it works is that when you turn 18 in Little Lamplight, you are then exiled and sent here. So Big Town just ends up being a place where a bunch of exiled teens with basically no equipment try and survive on their own. And on top of that, they are in a rough spot. super mutants have actually attacked them recently and dragged away 2 of their residences. And as you can see, a lot of them aren't exactly equipped to defend themselves. I mean, this person's literally holding a BB gun. Yeah, it's that bad. You can offer your services for free and actually save these 2 residences. They're actually held up not too far away from here in the Germantown Police HQ, which is where we'll go next. Right, imagine being a police officer for a moment in 2077. You're currently dealing with an infamous serial killer who's been active in the area for years, and then all of a sudden the National Guard has taken over your police station as a disaster relief center. No one was really told why, which makes everyone feel a little bit uneasy. Then before the bombs drop, you see that the crime has spiked a little bit. And in the records, you can see that someone was recently burgled, another one is about a house on fire, and another one is claiming his shoes are growing wings. I mean, at least his schizophrenia is quite creative. In the present day, Germantown Police Headquarters has now been taken over by super mutants, where they use it as a base to harass nearby settlements. Inside, you'll find the usual police station areas, office desks, terminals, a shooting range, and the jail cells, where one of the big town residences is being held. After clearing out the super mutants, you can rescue Red, who tells you another captive can be found in the kitchen.
Well, except maybe for Shorty, but no one comes back from the kitchen.
Help me. I've got your back.
With Shorty saved as well, we can escort both of them back to Big Town. But before leaving, you can offer your services once again to prepare the town for any future attacks, either training them to use firearms or help up set up defenses. I chose the firearms one, it's the easiest one, which is just in time for another attack on the town, some having more brain cells than others. The majority of them survive. I do need to head back to Megaton, but before doing so, there is 2 more locations close by to the police station, which will help with Moira's book, and that is to grab a landmine, which we can find at Minefield. I'm sure we can find one here. Minefield used to be a quiet suburban area before the war. It was known originally as Ridgefield, before later becoming known as Minefield after a crazed survivor turned the whole place into a death trap, using mines. After the Great War, it was eventually settled by a small tribe of survivors who used the isolation as protection and built a little community here. But that didn't last long. Slavers from Paradise Falls planned a raid, captured their residences, and enslaved them. And the only one to escape was a boy named Arkansas. Now grown old, Arkansas has become a paranoid sniper who covers the entire area with mines, determined to never let anyone take his home again. Raiders and slavers later tried to move in themselves, but his defenses were just too strong and they retreated. When you arrive, you're walking straight into his kill zone, and of course, as a threat, you can take him out. Though in his mind, he's just defending the last piece of his life he once had. Once he's dealt with, you can explore the 4 accessible homes, many of which contain safes and useful loot. Fun fact, there is also 67 frag mines placed throughout the town, making it one of the most heavily trapped areas in the game. Just up the road, we can find a rather big power station. We'll be seeing multiple power stations on this run, but they're all slightly different. This one is a large power plant along with a substation. It does contain some good loot, but it is defended by a bunch of ghouls, so you're going to have to remove those. And if you like the unarmed playthrough, or this is your favorite robot from New Vegas, you can also find a unique power fist called Fisto, which isn't a bad weapon. I think we've done enough here, so let's head back to Megaton and listen to Confessor Cromwell preach while we get irradiated. Moira wanted me to suffer with a heavy dose of radiation, so might as well pass the time.
Each of us shall know peace, shall know an end to pain.
Another thing she wanted was to go to the Super Duper Mart not too far away from here to see if there's any food and equipment still there. So that is our next stop.
Oh, great!
Now what's fun about this place is that a random encounter will always trigger here. For example, I got a bunch of raiders doing a trial beating, though I don't think they appreciated me watching.
You think you're good enough to us? Yeah! Help me with this one! God damn it!
The level design layout is made for multiple character designs. For example, you can sneak as there is some stealth boys to the side. There's also a laser pistol for an energy weapon early build, and explosives nearby the end of the shop. But for me, all of that just went horribly. The main interest, along with Moira's mission, is at the back of the shop, where you can find multiple Nuka-Cola Quantums. It looks like they received a shipping from the Nuka-Cola factory, which can actually be found in the game. These Quantums are rare, and a certain woman will take an interest in these, which we'll get to later on.
We're back. Somebody open up the... Hang on. Something ain't right here.
Once we grab the things she needs, we can head back, and the first chapter is done. Great! But now she wants us to test this stick out on roll mats, not again, on mole rats to see if they will repel them, and she guides us to test it out in the nearby DC ruins. I just realized I completely forgot about the Arafu mission, so I went back to complete it.
Thanks again, kid.
Let's focus back on the main quest to find dear old dad, so let's head on to the GNR building, which means approaching the metro station. This is the easiest way to get into the inner cities of DC, and so we have to travel through these metro stations to get there. Inside, it starts off pretty standard, throwing lower level enemies at you, and you follow the makeshift GNR signs left by the Brotherhood of Steel, until you reach an area that was intended to be your first introduction to feral ghouls. The level design is built quite well in comparison to other locations. You can hear the snarls echoing through the tunnels, a quick glimpse of the feral ghouls before running into the darkness, and you know you have to get through this gate and head to face them. At first you don't know how strong they'll be, but you'll learn that they aren't too bad. As you continue deeper through the tunnels into the DC metro system, they throw another new enemy at you. Super mutants, but they might be distracted on some radroaches or ghouls, showing you that they are a new type of threat. This enemy is specifically designed not to carry any heavy armed weaponry, so if you need to kill him, he won't be as dangerous, but a nice introduction to one of the most common enemies in the Capital Wasteland. There are more routes into the DC ruins, but if we're following the main quest, we need to keep following the arrows till we eventually emerge into Chevy Chase North. This would be the first taste of the DC ruins. It's isolating, it's dark, and it really builds that atmosphere with a feeling like, yeah, this place really got messed up by the war. We can also see the Washington Monument in the background, and of course, the GNR station. If we explore a little bit more, we will be attacked by some super mutants. I like hiding in this bomb shelter box, because when this happens, you will be saved by our metal angels called the Brotherhood of Steel. They are also going to the GNR as they are currently fighting a couple of super mutants over there too. But just before going up there, I do want to head up the road to Chevy Chase East. Nothing can really be found on the outside, but this is the main connection to the other parts of DC. Mainly the Vernon Square and DuPont Circle. We have a bunch of ghouls as normal, but this one seems to have a raider camp here. Or it used to have one, but it looks like it was overrun by ghouls. There's nothing really too crazy loot-wise that can be found here. Anyways, back to the GNR building, we can help out our Brotherhood of Steel pals. Luckily we can just let Lion's Pride just do their work. Until we finally get to the GNR building. Also, did I mention there were super mutant behemoths? Yeah, those are in the game too. Now, not much is known about the Galaxy News Radio in the pre-war era, but in the present day, it is up and running under the control of 3Dog. He's made it his mission to report on what's happening in the Capital Wasteland and promote a movement that he calls the Good Fight. The Brotherhood still took interest in both his message and, more importantly, the location of GNR. They both struck a deal, and the Brotherhood now protects this building, and in return they can use it as a forward base in the DC ruins. The Good Fight is basically a movement against the worst threats of the Wasteland, namely the super mutants, raiders, slavers, and especially the Enclave. 3Dog really hates the Enclave radio and kind of uses it as a battle against the propaganda that John Henry Eden is creating. What's so special about the Good Fight movement is that it actually expanded into the Fallout 4's universe, as Travis, the radio guy in Boston, mentions the Good Fight. So obviously there's been some impact there.
An old friend once told me, you gotta always fight the good fight.
You can also contribute to the Good Fight when 3Dog tells you that a super mutant shot the satellite relay dish that boosts the GNR signal. He needs someone to replace it. But if you get lucky with a speech check, you can convince him just to tell you where your dad went without even doing the job. And he points you towards Rivet City, south of the DC ruins. But we're going to play as a hero, so we're going to help him. But because we already know where our dad went, he will give you an additional reward. Remember that military cache that we found in Hamilton's hideaway? Yeah, he's going to give you the key for that. Also, as a side note that I thought about, 3Dog is considered a very good character, but if you have the Contract Killer perk, they don't give you any special bonus for killing him. Which is very strange because his voice is so massive in the Capital Wasteland. He is of course not invincible, so you can kill him if you want, and he will just get replaced by a woman called Margaret, who is the station's technician, who announces his death and basically plays music most of the time.
This is Margaret, and you're listening to, oh, the hell with it. Listen to some music and pray we find someone to replace 3Dog. If 3Dog were here, he'd say something witty. But he's not. 'Cause somebody killed him. So you get me playing music. Yay!
But we're looking to replace the dish, not 3Dog. So let's push deeper into the DC ruins, exiting near DNR into DuPont Circle. Now I'm just going to group all 4 locations together because DuPont Circle is a pretty big location. Now if you don't know, the DC ruins are split into separate world spaces, and because of the hardware limitations in 2008, this was Bethesda's way of breaking the city into sections while creating an illusion that some parts are fully destroyed and others are only partially destroyed. The metro tunnels kind of act as connectors between these pockets of the city. And honestly, it's a really smart mix of world building and technical design for the time. It seems that DuPont Circle on the surface is controlled by raiders, and some feral ghouls on the western side. The area is also heavily trapped with landmines, especially around the central fountain. This is also one of the few places in the inner DC ruins where you can access a shop interior. See, Fallout 3 kind of missed the mark on the idea of more interiors in DC, and so I would actually suggest, if you're going to do a playthrough of Fallout 3, to download the DC Interiors Project mod. It just adds a load more explorable buildings, and it just makes the DC ruins feel way more alive. Inside our only interior shop, we can find a bunch of clothes. Some fancy clothes, and a skill book inside, so nothing too exciting there. Lastly, we have 4 metro stations to look into, all leading to different places of the DC ruins. DuPont Circle West connects through Foggy Bottom Station, which leads to the Georgetown ruins. It also leads to the Metro Central, which is the main metro hub. DuPont Circle Station connects to other raider-infested metro tunnels, and then towards the Metro Central again. If you're confused about the metro network, well, don't worry, I think we all were. In fact, it became such a problem that there are plenty of illustrations of the metro tunnels and where they lead to online, and so I'm just going to use this illustration to help myself and you at home exactly where I'm going. Thank you, Sean Overcash. DuPont Station Northeast and DuPont Station East links to the Metro Junction and into a new pocket of the DC ruins, Vernon Square. But we don't need to go there, we actually need to go through the collapsed car tunnel. If you're at the car tunnel, make sure to shoot the cars. It creates this gnarly domino effect. The Metro Junction looks like it was once taken by raiders, but ghouls have once again ruined it for them. And through all this mess, we can continue following the Brotherhood of Steel signs until we get to the biggest metro station of the game, Metro Central. And all you need to know about this place for now is that it links to multiple places around DC. We just need to follow the one that leads to the Museum of History. If we continue following the tunnels, we can eventually leave the museum station and we are finally met with the mall. But before checking this beast of a place out, we can just turn around and find the Museum of History. Just outside the Museum of History, we meet a ghoul who welcomes you and then warns you about this area being pretty dangerous because, you know, there's a bit of a war zone going on right here. She explains that there is a settlement inside the museum made up entirely of ghouls, and as long as you're not a ghoul bigot, you'll do just fine. This building is based on the real National Museum of American History in DC, which explains the World War II exhibits and the Abraham Lincoln section. Inside the main hall we'll find Underworld, a ghoul settlement that was founded in 2230 by a small group of ghouls looking for somewhere they wouldn't face discrimination. And over 40 years, more ghouls migrated here from across the wasteland, and it grew into a proper community with a trader, a barber, a bar and a hotel. They are civil towards non-ghouls, but understandably cautious when you first arrive. Their town leader is Dr. Barrows, who runs the clinic in this settlement and is dedicated into studying ghoul biology, trying to understand what causes ghouls to turn feral, and can it be fixed. The name Underworld comes from the museum's final pre-war exhibit in 2077, which focused on the concepts of hell and the afterlife. There are other exhibits that can also be found, but inaccessible, such as the Resource Wars of 2052 and the Liberation of Alaska from China, including references to Operation Anchorage. The only accessible exhibit is the Abraham Lincoln section, which has unfortunately been overrun by feral ghouls. Though this area has some excellent loot centered around Lincoln. You can find Lincoln's coin collection, a voice recording, a toy Abe Lincoln, Lincoln's hat, and the best of all, Lincoln's repeater. These items are worth grabbing, as a few characters in the Wasteland have a very strong interest in Lincoln memorabilia, something we'll get onto soon. There is also some cut content for Underworld, which included a tour guide system with a holotape that you can listen to while walking around the museum, but unfortunately it was never finished. After stocking up with the local trader, it's time to now reach the Museum of Technology, which sits on the other side of that trench. Oh boy. Oh! Just like the Museum of History, this one is also based on the real DC building, the National Air and Space Museum. And as soon as we enter, we can find that it's completely overrun by super mutants. Considering we're deep into super mutant territory, this does kind of make sense for them to use this place as a base. The interior is laid out in themed exhibits, which gives this place quite a unique feel. Unfortunately, a lot of the rare tech has been destroyed or looted over the years, but some displays have survived. There's a small badly damaged exhibit on Stealth Boys designed by Robco, and a demonstration vault showing what vault life might have looked like, minus the social experiments. There's also some other fun nods here and there, like the Delta 9 rocket, a model of a vertibird that was planned to be used in 2085, the Wright brothers plane, which looks like it's had better days, and the Virgo 2 lunar lander, which conveniently still holds the satellite dish that 3 Dog needs. Before we leave, we can check out the planetarium, where you can trigger a space presentation and learn some fun facts. The downside, however, it is quite loud, and the noise draws in super mutants. There is also a little puzzle hidden in the museum. On certain terminals, you'll find a custom message that's tied to Jig's loot. You have to select the correct phrases on all 3 different computers, all linked to a scavenger named Prime. The hint is in the name. You just pick out the prime numbers, and once you've picked all 3 of them, you'll unlock a stash of hidden loot in one of the museum's rooms, along with instructions to meet at Jury Street Metro near Vault 101. But for now, we've got a satellite dish to install. Now that you think about it, did 3 Dog just expect the Lone Wanderer to be some sort of engineer and just know how to fix a satellite dish on the Washington Monument as well? a little bit strange. Honestly, it's kind of amazing that this structure is still standing after 200 years, especially when an atomic bomb has landed not too far away from here. This is based off the real-life monument of George Washington, the first president of the United States. And even in the wasteland, worn down and damaged, it's still the tallest structure in the game. And also a perfect spot to mount that satellite dish. At the entrance, we can see 2 Brotherhood of Steel soldiers from the 2nd Monument Defense Detachment. Their job is to guard the monument and prevent super mutants, or anyone else for that matter, from taking control of it. Unfortunately, if you hang around for too long, they will eventually get overwhelmed and killed by incoming super mutants. Inside, there is an elevator that will take us all the way to the top. Once we interact with the machine and install the dish, we have signal. It seems that 3 Dog is pretty happy about this.
People of the Capital Wasteland, you can hear me! Yee-haw! You can't stop the signal, baby!
And that wraps up one of the main quest objectives in Fallout 3. But we need to talk about the mall area. Now this is probably one of the most dangerous areas in the game. This large war zone stretches from the Washington Monument all the way to the Capitol building. There is about 3 factions fighting over this area, 4 if you're counting the Enclave once they get involved. It's pretty unclear why they're all fighting for this area, and it's also unclear of how this trench was formed. What we do know, however, is that the Brotherhood of Steel are trying to push back the hordes of super mutants that have infested DC ruins, and to protect those key locations. And while there's no confirmation of who built these trenches, in my opinion, I don't think that these are pre-war. But I do think they were created between the long conflict between the Brotherhood and the super mutants. The trenches kind of look relatively new, and if they were pre-war, I would have assumed that they would have collapsed by now. And I feel like the Brotherhood would have eventually made these trenches if it really was that bad. You can actually access one of the bunkers underneath, where it used to be part of the Brotherhood defenses before the super mutants overran it. So we've got the super mutants, we've got the Brotherhood of Steel. So who are the other factions? Well, to the east we have the Talon Company, who seem to be pushing into the Capitol building, and to the west we have the Slavers at the Lincoln Memorial. They don't actively seem to be fighting in the main conflict, but they do have tensions with the Brotherhood of Steel. What I love about the mall area is the fact that there's no major quests centered around the Capitol building or the trenches. It's just straight up a deathmatch here. I feel like this was just a massive missed opportunity for Bethesda to build up this massive war in the Broken Steel DLC to have the Brotherhood push through the trenches, or just something like that. That would have been a really cool thing to do. But we can't finish off the area without mentioning the mall metros nearby. We have Mall Northwest, Southwest, and Northeast. And looking at the layout, the Northwest tunnels seem to be connected to Georgetown and the other mall metro sections, which seems to be heavily damaged and taken over by feral ghouls due to the radiation. The Southwest tunnels leads to the hazmat disposal site and eventually into another DC ruins called Le Font. Did I say it right? Le Font or Le Font? I'm gonna say Le Font. The tunnels have a unique layout filled with radiation and even a gas leak, which you need to look out for. The Northeast Mall tunnels lead to the Pennsylvania Avenue, another DC ruins pocket, again filled with raiders and ghouls. There's also a metro tunnel near the Museum of Technology that isn't a marked location, but serves as like a safer route via the Museum Station metro. And the last thing before I forget, there is also a hidden tunnel that many players overlook, which is filled with Mirelurks and can be found near one of the metro entrances. The one last place to mention before leaving this battlefield is the Lincoln Memorial. And as stated before, this place has been taken over by slavers. And that is not a coincidence. These slavers believe that by occupying the memorial of a historic man who freed the slaves in 1863, that they're making a statement. Because during their hunt for slaves, they came across this memorial and seemed worried that these escaped slaves might one day find it and turn it into a beacon of hope. That's why they took control of the location. When you arrive, the slavers will threaten you and question your business. You can talk your way through with one of the guards and offer them help, but if you try to approach the memorial itself without permission, you will be shot on sight, as ordered. Leroy Walker is the leader of this group and can be found inside the Lincoln Memorial. He explains that he's been searching for a group of runaway slaves who are considering of using this place as a settlement, and he wants you to track them down.
That's too bad.
He's also interested in any Abraham Lincoln memorabilia, but I doubt he's going to preserve it or anything. He'll probably just destroy it as he sees it as like a symbol. So be cautious unless you only care about caps. The area as well is covered in traps. They clearly just don't want anyone close to this place. But I think that's enough for the mall for one day. Let's continue our journey to find Dad, as 3Dog mentioned, heading to Rivet City. Just off the river is Wilhelm's Wharf. It's a single shack owned by an old woman named Grandma Sparkle. She's basically a trader who sells food to hungry travelers coming in and out of the DC ruins. She explains that she can get a lot of the Mirelurk meat from around the area with the help of her 2 sons who hunt them. So it sounds like she's got a nice gig going on here. You can access the shack, but it will be considered trespassing, and she might be a little bit annoyed with that. Right next door is another metro. Yes, I'm sure you missed those. This one isn't that interesting, and to be honest, it's quite linear in design, as it just takes you into another DC ruin world space in Arlington. We don't really need to go there just yet, but it is a nice entry into those sides of the ruins. If you cross the bridge covered in mines, we can find the Anchorage Memorial. This was constructed just before the Great War, as Anchorage was the last major battle before the bombs dropped. It depicts 3 soldiers celebrating their victory. However, if we play the Anchorage DLC, the story takes place just before the big final push. So it seems the memorial may have been designed in anticipation of the victory, regardless of how the battle actually ended. At the top, you'll always encounter a random event, like the one I ran into.
There's nothing better than fresh dog, don't you think?
But the real value of this location is inside the memorial itself. It's broken down into 4 sections. The first is the memorial facility, which was used as a living quarters by some wastelanders. You can find various loot scattered around, including a safe containing a door component that opens access to a utility room. Next is the memorial facility bay, where you can find a mercenary's body with a note about trading Mirelurk meat. It seems like his mission didn't go too well. Above that are the facility offices, where the main feature is a Mirelurk breeding ground. You'll likely encounter a Mirelurk king here, which can be quite difficult at a low level. This is also linked to Moira's book, so if you do kill all the Mirelurks, it won't be 100% accurate when she wants to do her experimentation. And lastly, there's the memorial entrance, which is also used as a breeding area. This is where you can find a broken door that requires the door component. Inside is a stash that serves a reward for fully exploring and looting the memorial. Right next door to the Anchorage Memorial is the Tepid Sewers. We were meant to come here for one of Moira's experiments. It seems that this place is also connected to the metro tunnel in Georgetown, so this is an alternative way to get into central DC.
Well now, if it isn't the little saint from the vault.
Inside you'll find a bunch of mole rats, which is great for our experiments. It's a shame that this happens to them. Poor things. But the further you explore, you'll find a group of raiders, including a unique raider called Rock Salt. It turns out these raiders are hunting for the mole rats as well, to sell off the meat back at their base in Jury Street Metro. This is also a really good place for early and mid-game loot, as there's plenty of ammo, weapons, and meds. Leaving the area, we can find a tent with some super mutants and a centaur. Make sure to pop by because there is a Keller holotape there that we can use for later on. Why is there a Enclave soldier here? He shouldn't be here. As we turn around, we can find a large hotel-like building, and this is Dukov's place. As you can see, it's filled with degeneracy and his 2 party girls. Dukov was once a mercenary, and after a big contract was done, he retired his violent lifestyle and decided a different lifestyle was much better for him. You can kind of guess what that's about. To quote the Fallout wiki, his daily schedule is drinking lots of alcohol and taking jet with Cherry and Fantasia, and then party at the end. What a life. Kinda crazy when there's Mirelurks just outside his home and a raider gang just down the road as well. If you ever need any pre-war money or whiskey, this is the place to go, but you will lose karma if you steal it. As we follow the river south, we eventually reach one of the most important locations in the game, the Jefferson Memorial. Built to honor one of the most influential figures in American history, Thomas Jefferson, the 3rd President of the United States and the key author of the Declaration of Independence. This monument was created to commemorate his achievements and a symbol of freedom from the British rule. It became a major tourist attraction throughout the years, and even after the war, it still remains surprisingly intact. The Lone Wanderer's father, James, made it his mission to bring clean water to the Capital Wasteland, and to do this, he began Project Purity, along with his wife Catherine, Dr. Lee, and he even got some help from the leader of the Brotherhood of Steel chapter. They converted this memorial into a massive water purifier and began working on it. Unfortunately, after Catherine's death, morale collapsed and the project was abandoned. Although they did have the Brotherhood's protection, Dr. Lee didn't fully trust them either, and it created many setbacks, eventually pushing the team to walk away from the plan. Until now. That's when James set out once more to finish what he started. However, the memorial is now crawling with super mutants, and we have to just clear them out anyway to progress the main quest. The location is divided into 3 main sectors: the main entrance, which includes a gift shop, the rotunda, where the experiments took place, and the basement levels. As we explore, we can find holotapes documenting James's progress on Project Purity. The final tape reveals that he has gone to Vault 112 to speak with a scientist living beneath a garage far to the west. Although we have our next destination now, I do briefly want to stop by a massive aircraft carrier nearby, and probably the most important settlement in the game, Rivet City. This massive ship was abandoned after the Great War, and eventually became home to many people across the Capital Wasteland. In 2237, a group of scientists discovered the ship and saw its potential as a base for research. After clearing out the Mirelurks, they established the Rivet City Science Outpost. Over the next 2 years, more Wastelanders began settling here, and it gradually grew into the largest settlement in the Capital Wasteland, forming its own economy, government, and security force. In 2258, Madison Lee and her team arrived at Rivet City, following the abandonment of Project Purity. She attempted to resume her project and even tried taking over the entire team from the head scientist at the time, Horace Pinkerton. Pinkerton was obviously not very happy about this, and so he just left his position and exiled himself to the other side of the ship, where you can still find him. It's just surrounded by traps and Mirelurks. By 2277, Rivet City is now a thriving trading hub. It has 24-hour security and access to clean food and water thanks to the scientists. They grow non-irradiated crops and also serve as a major trading resource. Rivet City is divided into several sections. The first is the main market area, where you can buy everything that you need, such as weapons, clothing, medicine, and even junk. On the other side of the ship at the bottom is the Muddy Rudder, a rundown bar for those who just want to have a drink and be left alone. The central ship areas are split into the middle and the upper decks, with a noticeable class divide. The poorer residences live on the lower down deck, where you can find the living quarters, a church, a hotel, and on the upper deck we have the museum, the clinic, and you can also find the science lab, and this is where Madison Lee and her team work. At the top level is where the security live, where we can find their barracks and even an armory guarded by a Mr. Gutsy. There's also a flight deck as well, which really doesn't have much going on, although it does look like people play baseball up here. There is also a time system here, where after 8 PM the shop will close, and if you decide to enter in, it will be considered trespassing. A bit of fun cut content for you guys. In development, there were plans for an enclave attack on Rivet City, where the Lone Wanderer would evacuate residences and take them to the Citadel, the Brotherhood of Steel base. But the idea was eventually scrapped because Mr. Todd Howard himself said it would be a bit too complex. Which is kind of a shame, really. Imagine an assault on the largest settlement in the Capital Wasteland. That would have been really cool to see the security fight off against the Enclave. Before heading to the garage where our father went, we're taking a little bit of a detour. And that's because the old man who owns the museum wants us to get the Declaration of Independence from the National Archives, found at the Mall District, which gives us a perfect excuse to explore a few more locations that we skipped over. But to get there, we need to go through the nearest metro station, Anacostia Crossing. Now before we enter, there is a random encounter that usually triggers here, and it's typically either going to be the Talon Company or the Regulators. Basically, depending on your karma, one group will come and get you. Now this station is basically just to get to the mall or the Steward District, but as we don't necessarily need to use it right now, we can just fast travel there. Now that we're back at the mall, we can find the National Archives building. Its original purpose was to preserve one of the most important documents in American history, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and the Magna Carta. Unfortunately, it has now been taken over by super mutants, with robots still acting as the security for these historic relics. Near the entrance, we will meet a woman named Sydney, who warns us about a super mutant attack. She explains that she's also a treasure hunter hired by the same old man in Rivet City to retrieve the Declaration of Independence. So we just agreed to work together, since security is pretty OP around here.
Smart move.
Well, she did a lot of good, didn't she? After fighting through the robots, we finally reach the Archive Strong Room. Here is where we can encounter a Protectron with the personality of Button Gwinnett, one of the founding fathers. He was originally programmed as a tour guide, but after 200 years of laying around, he eventually got a bit corrupted, and now sees himself as the protector of the documents. Unfortunately, he refuses to hand them over because he thinks I'm some kind of redcoat. The disrespect. Do I even sound like a redcoat? Absolutely appalling behavior. I told him that I'll think about it. After shooting a few more super mutants in the face, I made my way back to Rivet City to hand over the documents. Except the Magna Carta. The British blood in me says to keep this one. I think we sidetracked enough now, so let's continue the main quest to find dear old dad, shall we? On our way west towards the garage, we can come across a small settlement area called Drury Street Metro. This spot actually has two accessible stores, the grocer and Hank's electrical supply, and as expected, raiders have taken over the area. Interestingly, they haven't claimed the grocer, and that's because it's rigged with a full-on Rube Goldberg trap. Step on the pressure plate, and it will knock over some boxes. Let me try that again. There is some decent loot here, especially the sugar bombs in the shop, plus a few skill perks here and there. And if you did complete the unmarked quest for Jig's loot in the Museum of Technology, a scavenger called Prime can spawn here carrying a unique Chinese assault rifle, probably one of the best weapons in the game. Inside the metro, you'll find raiders producing something called Mole Rat Wonder Meat. Earlier we saw raiders in the tepid sewers hauling this meat around, which ties to this little operation they've got going on. If we keep moving towards the garage, we'll eventually run into the biggest raider base in the game, Evergreen Mills. This old factory serves as a central hub for raider activity. You'll find slaves held in cages, they somehow captured a super mutant behemoth, all locked up, and even a brothel inside run by a woman known as Madame. Around the outside of the factory, there are several shacks that act like guard posts, and they usually contain some solid loot inside. To actually navigate through all this, it's just best to shoot the electrical box connected to the behemoth's cage. That will then free it, and it will cause absolute chaos. And while the raiders are distracted on the behemoth, you can easily pick them off. And then of course you've got all the raiders in the factory. Right at the back of the factory, you'll find a trader named Smiling Jack. Even though he was surrounded by raiders, he's actually quite neutral and he only cares about making caps. So he'll trade with you. Or you can kill him and take his unique weapon, the terrible shotgun, which is a very strong weapon. At the very end of the area, you can find the Bartok bobblehead, and don't forget to free the slaves. It's easy to overlook them sometimes.
Finally, free!
So here we are, finally at Smith Case's garage, where Vault 112 is hidden in the basement. According to Vault-Tec records, this is the last vault officially confirmed as completed. And while there are other numbers that we can find beyond Vault 112, they were always only close to completion, but never actually fully completed, or even began an experiment. Vault 112 was designed to house just 85 residents. Its experiment was for them to live indefinitely in a virtual reality simulation, with its overseer as Dr. Stellanius Braun, the one and only that would go on to create the Gek. Inside we can find a lounge filled with people suspended in simulation pods, living artificial lives. The original purpose was to let the residents experience utopian worlds based on their own personal choice, but unfortunately Braun had other plans. He trapped the residents inside his own personal simulation, taking full control so that they could never leave. Out of boredom, he would repeatedly kill them in different ways within the simulation, and each time they died, their memories were wiped and they were reset, forced to relive a cycle endlessly. This is what would happen to your father as well. A RoboBrain tells us that we're a few hundred years late to this experiment and suggests that we should just hop on in one of those pods. But then I thought to myself, how on earth did a bunch of humans survive for over 200 years? Well, apparently these RoboBrains have been maintaining them by injecting nutrient serums that will keep the body alive and prevent aging. You can find one terminal of an elderly lady where it says that it's slightly malfunctioning, which suggests that her aging has slowed down, but it's not fully stopped. Inside the pod chamber, we enter a simulation called Tranquility Lane, a perfect middle-class Grove Street. We appear as a child here, and we quickly realize that we're trapped here too. We are provided with very cheery music and a sort of pre-war filter on top. Braun has made himself a little girl, which is quite disturbing, and the whole vibe of this entire place feels like something straight out of We Happy Few. When we speak to Braun, he wants us to complete some cruel games that involve tormenting or even killing some of the residences. You can try and stop him by punching him, I guess. It's not gonna work, is it? But there is a good option. In one of the abandoned homes, you can interact with these objects, and if we do it in the right order, which is the same tune as we hear from the music, it will activate a failsafe. This triggers a simulated Chinese invasion and permanently kills the residents in the real world, freeing them from Braun's endless torment. And the only one that will continue living and permanently living is Braun himself, all alone in this simulation. In a way, that's really evil. After leaving the simulation, we finally reunite with Dad, who's surprised that we've actually made it this far. He wastes no time in setting off to restart Project Purity, and we headed back towards Rivet City. But before leaving the vault, there is some worthwhile loot in the side rooms. It's just worth checking those places out. Also, one last thought about Vault 112. It would have been interesting that if you destroyed the RoboBrains, or maybe shutting down the whole system would give you good karma as well, because if Braun really was stuck in there forever in internal isolation, it's kind of its own punishment, and I get that he was a really bad man, but surely the best moral ground here would have just been to kill everyone in the simulation. I don't know, I just feel like that would have been a nice choice to have. Before heading back to Rivet City, I do want to check out the local area, such as the Yaguai tunnels, and as the name suggests, a bunch of mutated bears have made a cave as their home. Looking at the environmental storytelling, there seems to be more that can be learnt about this place. We can find a bunch of dead wastelanders who may have been using this as a temporary home, but that's when they discovered a bunch of bears were living on the other side, which would explain the barricades everywhere. There are a few scripted areas such as the Yaguai running through the caves and the other breaking down a barrier. And apart from that, you can find a sneak bobblehead at the end of the tunnels, and a note from a Wastelander explaining that an old woman was crazy to think there were monsters in here. It also seems like the Wastelanders came in here to hide from raiders too, which totally explains it because our next location isn't too far away from here, and it's a small raider camp. This is Charnel's house. It's a rather straightforward location containing a couple of raiders who are using a 2-story broken home as a camp. They've rigged the whole place up with mines so nobody can get close to them. But that's really about it. You can find a Nuka-Cola Quantum and a skill book here. Moving further south now, we can come across a tiny settlement of 2 called Girdershade. Now, it gets this very creative name from a broken part of the bridge providing its shade. This 2-house settlement has one of the most annoying characters in the game, maybe even beating Moira, who seems to be obsessed with Nuka-Cola. Bethesda loved this character so much that they brought them back for Fallout 4. Meet Sierra. She runs the only Nuka-Cola museum in the Capital Wasteland and wants us to expand it for her.
When Nuka-Cola was invented by John Caleb Bradburton.
Oh boy! John Caleb Bradburton? How exciting!
She asks you to bring 30 bottles of Nuka-Cola Quantum, which are quite limited edition as they only just started shipping them just before the bombs dropped, making them quite rare to find. If you agree, she will reward you with a schematic to the Nuka grenade, which isn't a bad throwing weapon. As you leave, you'll be approached by the other resident, Ronald Laren, who has a different interest in your quantum hunt. He's taken quite a liking to Sierra, and since his wife died, he wants to now impress her. He asks you to give him the Nuka-Cola Quantums instead, so he can then woo her later on with them. You can of course refuse this idea, or if you do need some extra caps, he might charge more for them. Just down the road from Girdershade is a gas station with a single shack there. Nothing much goes around the exterior, but inside you can find a bottle cap mine schematic, a skill book, and a Nuka-Cola Quantum to add to your collection. This is just a place for loot, really. Right next door, we've got ourselves another power station. Woo! It's good for a little bit of loot, but apart from that, that's really about it. Oh, you will be approached by a couple of raiders after leaving the station. Near the furthest part of the map, southwest, you can find a campground. Most of the time approaching this location, you will find a wounded Deathclaw. Maybe this will be your first experience with a Deathclaw, so it's a pretty good thing that it's wounded, isn't it? But not in my case. There isn't too much to be shown about this place except that it is home to the Deathclaw Gauntlet schematic, probably one of the coolest unarmed weapons in the game in my opinion. It was clear that some Wastelanders were using this place as a rest stop before being attacked by the mutant inhabitants. But there's a more interesting place just nearby here. Man, this is probably my favourite location and probably the spookiest location in the entire Capital Wasteland. This building was owned by Dunwich Borers LLC, a company that manufactured rock drills and drilling systems. Pretty boring, right? Well, inside there is a bunch of ghouls who have turned feral and probably the former workers of Dunwich Building. But it gets far worse the more you explore. You may hear footsteps when no one is there and experience hallucinations from before the war. You can also find audio tapes of an explorer called Jamie, who wandered in here, slowly descended into madness, and eventually became a ghoul himself. As we go deeper into the lower levels of the building, we eventually find a tunnel. Inside, there's an ominous sound coming from an obelisk. And next to it is Jamie, along with other ghouls. And it seems like these guys are actually worshipping it. This obelisk is linked to the forgotten god called Qualtoth. How it got there is unknown, but since the company's management were apparently part of this cult, it's possible they were searching for fragments or relics connected to their god. This idea is supported by cut content suggesting that the owner, Richard Dunwich, was connected to the Black Hall family. In Point Lookout, a member of that family sends you to retrieve a book related to the same god. Aside from being one of the most unique and unsettling experiences in the Capital Wasteland, there isn't that much in terms of loot. However, you can find a bobblehead near the end of the building. Moving away from the creepy atmosphere and towards a massive tool building nearby, there's a station we'll come across, but we'll just skip that for now since that location is connected to this large building ahead. This place was originally built on a plantation, and before the war it turned into a hotel resort for the rich and powerful. Pretty ironic, right? Somehow the building is still standing and almost completely intact after the bombs dropped, with all the luxuries of clean water and electricity. They definitely got lucky here. The owner, Alistair Tenpenny, a man originally from England, moved into the Capital Wasteland and luckily found this place abandoned. He wanted to renovate it and restore it, which was possible because he was extremely rich already, but we never learn how he got his money. By 2277, he filled it with wealthy entrepreneurs and stuck-up elites who wanted to live in luxury in the middle of the wasteland. They're protected by well-equipped security, whose job is basically to keep the commoners out. When you first arrive, you'll hear an argument between a guard and a ghoul, who claims that he does have enough money to enter. The guards refuse his plea because they see ghouls as dirty, subhuman mutants. The ghoul swears he'll get his revenge one day and runs off. You can persuade the guards to let you in so you can experience the luxury of Tenpenny Tower. Inside, it seems like the renovations are done very well. There's reception music, a bar, a high-end clothing store, a trader, a doctor's clinic, and a cafe. They pretty much got everything under one roof. Along the sides of the tower are the residential rooms, home to the wealthy clients, including the famous wasteland adventurer, Herbert Daring Dashwood, whose stories you can hear on Galaxy News Radio. At the top of the tower is Tenpenny's personal suite, complete with his own balcony. You might even catch him sniping into the distance, talking about how he sees the wasteland as his own personal safari. Isn't he a nice fellow, isn't he? There's only one room that you won't be able to access, and that's because it is your own personal home. Well, potentially. You just need to choose to blow up Megaton, and Tenpenny will reward you with a suite right next to his, which we're definitely not going to do. Okay, I just wanted the nice room, okay? As for the ghoul situation, the head of security, Gustavo, will ask you to deal with the ghouls for a price, so they can stop becoming a problem to Mr. Tenpenny. And that's where we will need to go to Warrington Train Yard. So to keep it nice and simple, there's ghouls. Lots of ghouls down here. You can find bits of loot, I guess, like this missile launcher here, but its main purpose is to get to this little camp that Roy Phillips and his friends are in Warrington Station. For some reason, one of the ghouls attacked me and one of them thought that I was attacking him or something like that. I don't know, he just attacked me on sight for some reason, but that doesn't really matter. It looks like Roy and his group have actually set up their own security around the station. Inside one of the rooms of the station you can find Roy Phillips and Bessie Lynn, and you can just deal with them really quickly if you want to.
So, he isn't man enough to do it himself?
If you push past a series of barricades deeper inside, you'll find a large group of ghouls, and these are tied to Roy Phillips' plan, because you'll find out that they have access to the underground tunnels that connect to the basement of Tenpenny Tower. Everything here just links up with each other, essentially meaning Roy Phillips was just going to let out a bunch of ghouls into Tenpenny Tower through this tunnel. So defending Roy and his actions, I would say, isn't exactly the good karma option, but that's just my opinion. After clearing things out, you can unlock the station exit and come right out near Tenpenny Tower. But just before telling Gustavo the good news, there's actually an accessible store just down the road worth checking out. You can find a Nuka-Cola Quantum there, and even a trader inside.
There's your caps.
If you're wondering why there's a bunch of Protectrons around DC, well, you can probably blame this Robco facility. This is where Robco built their robots, whether it's for domestic use or for military use.
I'll just transfer the codes and you've got a deal, friend.
Sergeant RL3, Gutsy class, robotic soldier.
It's a shame really, because they didn't really build that much lore around this place. You can access the main terminal in the facility just to turn off all the Protectrons if you want, or you can use it to get the robots to kill all the radroaches nearby. There are a couple of skill books that can be picked up here and a couple of stealth boys, but more importantly, you can find a Protectron on a toilet. Amazing, Bethesda. Speaking of somewhere more disappointing, there's another power station. Again, it's alright for loot, I guess. This one actually has a mini nuke inside, which is cool. You will experience a random encounter at some point here too, but that's really about it. Anyways, we need to deal with the main quest. Let's go head back to Project Purity.
Hey, is that you? Oh.
We got Dr. Lee to come along to the Jefferson Memorial, where we got to work. Dad found out I blew up Megaton. He seemed pretty disappointed in me. After pressing a couple of buttons, the Enclave show up. I accidentally got stuck in this area where you're not meant to be, and that was interesting.
Run. Run.
Then the rest of the survivors evacuated through the tunnels. This isn't really a location, but just to make sure, there's Enclave and ghouls, and more Enclave. Then we finally made it out, just outside of the Citadel. This is one of the most important locations in the game. The primary base of the Brotherhood of Steel. Originally, the Brotherhood's sole purpose was to preserve advanced technology, believing that humanity could no longer be trusted with it. You can find the Brotherhood across all of America in multiple different chapters, but many of them follow their own interpretation of the Codex, including this chapter, who broke off to pursue their own vision of the future. In the Capital Wasteland, you may notice the Brotherhood outcasts patrolling around. These are members who are stuck with the original rules, preserving technology, and avoid getting involved with locals, as they put it. While the main chapter here chose a different path. That shift happened under Elder Owen Lyons, who was once part of the OG Brotherhood in Fallout 1. He was sent east with 3 objectives: recover lost technology, assess the super mutant threat in DC, and re-establish control with the Eastern Brotherhood presence. In 2255, Lyons established a base inside the ruins of the Pentagon, also known as the Citadel. There, they discovered a huge amount of preserved pre-war technology, including a relic of the old world, Liberty Prime. With his findings and accomplishments, Lyons was promoted to Elder and ordered to continue focusing on technology recovery. However, once he saw how overrun DC was with super mutants, and then later met James and Dr. Lee, his priorities shifted. He chose to focus more on fighting mutants and protecting civilians rather than strictly hoarding technology. This did not sit well with the West Coast Brotherhood. They wanted him to stay on mission, and when Lyons refused, contact was eventually cut. A split formed within the chapter, and those who opposed him became the Outcasts, continuing the old mission while Lyons' Brotherhood worked to defend the people of the Wasteland. The Citadel itself was originally part of the Pentagon, home of the US Department of Defense. Somehow, much of the structure survived the war. The Brotherhood now uses the courtyard as a training ground, while in the interior serves as their command center, living quarters, workshops, and the place where they work on restoring Liberty Prime. There are rumors that Liberty Prime was originally a joint project between General Atomics and Robco, which explains why Robert House, the owner of Robco, had a picture right next to it. The project was later then abandoned after the bombs fell. There is a couple of things you can do at the Citadel, which include trading with the Quartermaster and getting power armor training, with the Elder's approval, of course.
To wear power armor, first thing you need to do is relax your muscles.
But most importantly, the lead scribe tells us about a Gek that could be a key tool for Project Purity. Checking the Brotherhood's terminals reveals that there is one in Vault 87, but the main entrance is flooded with lethal radiation, and the only safe way is through the underground tunnels, which sets up our next main destination. I just want to stop by the Arlington Library because it is also owned by the Brotherhood of Steel. Before the war, this was the Library of Congress. Well, what's left of it. It used to be a raider base before the Brotherhood made it their mission to reclaim the place. The main purpose now is to gather as much knowledge from the library and to recover the library data. Once you enter the place, the scribe will let you in on the condition that you do help them out by finding any pre-war books that you find in the Capital Wasteland. They just have to be intact and new. To the side, you can see that the Brotherhood are still clearing out all the raiders. You can obviously help them out if you want to. Also, a random fact, there's a fresh apple that can be found near a raider's body. No idea how it got there, considering that apples are extremely rare and can only be found at like Rivet City. So I don't know where they got that from. But if you'd like to help out the Brotherhood of Steel clear out the raiders, you can move into the building with them. But eventually they will probably be killed by the raiders, and you will just have to finish the mission for them. At the far end of the building, you'll encounter a bunch of raiders and turrets guarding the main terminal the scribe needs. You can also find some ink for the Independence mission. It's just so you can make a copy if you need to. But that's really about it of the Arlington Library. Let's move next door to the Alexandra Arms. Who are these people? This looks like another raider group who have settled down in this hotel, and surprisingly this building has held itself pretty well. Inside the entrance, it looks like the raiders have been very busy decorating the place, but apart from looting and killing raiders, there isn't really much purpose of this place. You can find a couple of skill magazines and a quantum for your troubles though. Anyways, let's go and get that Gek. On our way there, we can bump into another power station. You can never have enough of these. This location isn't too bad for loot really. There's 2 quantums, a stealth boy, and a few skill books. Honestly, it's not a bad spot. You can also find a nearby Keller holotape as well, which will be important later on. But what's not important is the Jailbert Brothers waste disposal site. If you like your pee glowing in the dark, then this is the place for you. There is loads of radiation that can be given to the Lone Wanderer when visiting here. You can find some radaway and a radiation suit inside the offices, but that's really about it. Next door to the waste disposal site is Fort Bannister, the main headquarters of the Talon Company. We've encountered the Talon Company forces a few times by now, but who exactly are they? Well, not much is officially known about their origins, but they function kind of like the Gunners in Fallout 4. They're a highly trained group of mercenaries that are willing to take any job, no matter how evil, ridiculous or violent it is. They're essentially guns for hire, but like the bad kind. At the moment, they seem to be contracted to stir up as much trouble as they can in the Capital Wasteland. I would not be surprised if this was from Alistair Tenpenny. This is exactly something he would do. Unfortunately, there is no confirmation in the canon for that. They fortified their base of operations here at Fort Bannister, which is interesting because this location was actually near one of the nuclear bombs' impact. You can see evidence of that near this large crater. The surface level of the base have been heavily damaged, but the underground bunker remains intact. Considering this area is where some of the DC nuclear silos are located, it doesn't surprise me that the Chinese were trying to destroy this place pre-war. A fun piece of wasteland lore for you here. This is the site where the remnants of an alien body were recovered. On the game guide, it reads something like, "They're here and they are pissed," but I can only find that in the game guide, unfortunately. Deep inside the base, you can find the leader of the Talon Company, Commander Jabsko. He is wearing the only Talon Company helmet in the game. It seems like they must have had a shortage of something. And he carries a unique combat knife called the Occam's Razor, which, despite the name, isn't that powerful in combat. If you decide to wipe out the Talon Company forces, there will be a ton of loot for you. Any weapons, ammo, grenades, mines, anything, you name it, you can find it here and stack up a lot of. In my case, a bunch of Chinese assault rifle parts. But as we move closer to Vault 87, we can take a stop at the Everglow National Campground. It looks like an isolated, maybe vacation trailer park, and that's really about it. This looks like it was mainly a raider camp, but unfortunately the super mutants are moving in quickly. This would make a lot of sense considering the super mutants have a very heavy presence around here. The main loot you can find here is sugar bombs. There's 11 of them. Make sure to pick it up, it's perfect for the Ultrajet guy. Now we've reached the tunnels that lead to Vault 87, and standing at the entrance is the settlement of Little Lamplight. As soon as you approach, one of the kids in an oversized military clothing will stop you and say that you're not allowed in because you're an adult. If you have the Child at Heart perk, you can get in immediately, but if you don't have it, there is a speech check, or you have to earn your way in by rescuing a couple of the kids from the slavers in Paradise Falls. But we don't need to do that. We're gonna just skip straight through. Sorry, it just needed to happen. I hate that guy. So now how did a bunch of kids take control of a cave system like this? Well, back in 2077, on the day that the bombs dropped, a class from an elementary school was visiting the caves with a few teachers and some parents. Just before they were leaving, a nuclear cloud was spotted over DC and the surface was destroyed. Chaos ensued and they were trapped inside the caves. Some adults left to try and find some help but never returned, and others just died in cave accidents. Eventually, the last adult went out in desperation to search for supplies, leaving the kids all alone. One of the older kids at the time became the leader, effectively becoming the mayor, and organized a group to explore the deeper parts of the cave system. They eventually found the sealed door of Vault 87 and tried to get help. Someone inside did respond, but told them to go away, assuming that they were already dead, probably caused by the hallucinations from both the tunnel's radiation leaks and the experiment that was going on inside the vault. Feeling betrayed, the kids swore to never let in any adults or mungos again, to the point that once any of the kids reach the age of 16, they also get kicked out into the wasteland, into our lovely settlement, Big Town. Now in 2277, they formed a functioning settlement. They survive off the fungus that grows in the caves, and any of the travelling scavengers have been given them holotapes for education, such as reading, medicine, survival skills, and weapon training. To be honest, this location and its design is cool and all, but I have so many problems with this place. Like, how are they defending themselves against the super mutants? And where do they get all these dogs from? Why do they all have custom names? None of this actually explains in-game very well. Let me know your thoughts about this place. We can gain access into Vault 87 upon request, and we can walk into the tunnels of Vault 87. This is probably one of the most important vaults in Fallout lore, primarily because of the FEV experiments. This is where one of the main research centers focused all around the Force Evolutionary Virus, aka the super mutant creation. The original dwellers were exposed to this virus to study its effect on humans. The FEV virus would cause the skin to thicken, increase size and strength, and it dramatically alters mental states, often making the subjects more aggressive or anxious. Over time, the experiments continued under Vault-Tech's orders. Eventually, some of the infected broke out, overwhelming the Vault's security. Many of them escaped, while others remained and continued spreading the virus. This was the origin of the super mutants in the Capital Wasteland. To sustain their numbers, the super mutants would kidnap humans and expose them to the FEV virus, creating new generations of mutants over the following 200 years. Eventually, the FEV supply did run out, and they were left roaming the Capital Wasteland in search for more subjects. By the time we arrive, Vault 87 is primarily a super mutant stronghold. Many areas have been destroyed or abandoned, but the interior still shows evidence of a super mutant presence. As we move further in, we pass through old experimentation rooms and can observe the failed FEV experiments. Among the super mutants, there is one notable figure who stands out: Forks. Forks is a super mutant master, unusually intelligent and polite, retained his reasoning and intellect after being infected, which by the way is extremely rare. He's also one of the original dwellers of Vault 87 and was locked away by the other mutants, because they consider him as a failed experiment. For 200 years, Forked survived by educating himself through the Vault's mainframe, learning and keeping his mind sharp. When you encounter him, he requests your help to be freed, and in return, he will assist you in obtaining a Gek. Freeing him is almost mandatory. He will help you out fight against the other super mutants with his super sledge, and also pick up that Gek, which is pretty helpful considering that it's filled with high radiation levels. He will give you the Gek, and when things are looking up, that is when you are ambushed.
Make sure the Gek is secured aboard my vertibird. Prepare him for transport immediately.
You are then taken to Raven Rock, the main headquarters of the Enclave. Colonel Autumn is waiting for you to wake up and demands the password to the Project Purity. Of course, you don't have to give it to him.
Why do you insist on provoking me?
Luckily, the President gets involved and lets you out in order to meet him face to face, giving you somewhat free reign to explore. Raven Rock is the Enclave's primary base of operations. They claim to be the true remnants of the pre-war America, staffed by highly trained military personnel and scientists. The base itself is technologically advanced as well, with vertibirds, power armor, and advanced weaponry. But this was designed long before the Great War. In fact, this was constructed in the Cold War era, as a shelter for military officials in case of a nuclear conflict. The ZAX unit, which eventually became the AI known as President John Henry Eden, was installed to oversee operations. Its original purpose was to store and manage data, acting as some sort of archive. But over time, the AI developed its own personality, modeled on the historical presidents. John Henry Eden would then make contact after the destruction of the oil rig in Fallout 2 and ordered a relocation to Raven Rock. providing resources and a building for the Enclave to rebuild and expand. But as we will soon discover, this plan would eventually fall flat, as Colonel Autumn would tell everyone to ignore the President and kill the Lone Wanderer, causing a civil war within Raven Rock.
101 is to be shot on sight. I repeat, shot on sight. This is an order.
Within the complex there are 3 levels. Currently on level 3, this is where the holding cells are. Level 2 contains the science labs and experimentation areas, including the studies on the Deathclaws and the super mutants. This level also contains Colonel Autumn's office and the Zack's override terminal, which allows you to override President Eden if you wanted to. And on level 1 is where Eden's terminal is located, allowing you to interact with the President. After speaking with him, he will provide us with a modified FEV that is supposed to be used in Project Purity. If you decide to make this move, it will basically lead to everything that is mutated to die, which sounds good in practice, but this also affects anyone that is irradiated in any way, meaning a lot of Wastlanders would also perish as well. You can also decide to blow up the President either by using science or that override holotape, which to be honest is probably the best thing to do. Then we can make our getaway. And no, this isn't a boss in the base game, but I really wish they had one, because I'm kind of glad this mod provided that. Plus his armour looks kind of cool. As we escape Raven Rock, the rest of the Enclave will scatter and the entire base blows up. We can find Forks with an OP Gatling gun here, and he says that he followed us all the way up here. That's insane. I mean, that's also nice of him as well. It's a shame that my karma is a bit too low, because you can have him as a follower. All that's left now is to go back to the Citadel and confront with the rest of the Enclave at Project Purity. But I'm going to utilize this time to share with you some other locations around the area. And I don't think you're ready for this one. Yep, it's another power station. With its impenetrable gate, you can get yourself a dart gun schematic and a skill book for your collecting pleasure. That's about it. Moving on. Near the ends of the map, you'll find a couple of these scattered around. Being so close to Raven Rock, it looks like it has been taken over by the Enclave. To the side, we can find a humble trader who didn't know that the Enclave just moved in recently, and to protect his business, he tried to stop them. Didn't turn out too well for him though. Inside the SATCOM array is more Enclave and a pile of dead Wasteland ghouls. So they either cleared up a group of Wastelanders using this as a refuge, or they were using them as experiments. That does remain uncertain. You can reach to the top where you can find more vertibirds fleeing from Raven Rock, which is a nice touch. Not much in terms of loot except from the Enclave themselves and a skill book. After unloading all the loot, placing my bobbleheads down, and speaking with the Elder at the Citadel, I just wanted to grab the Brotherhood power armor. And once that's obtained, I went back to Raven Rock and onto a broken highway. And this is where we can find that someone has made a makeshift fort. For some reason, Victoria Watts came to say hello about the android thing. Who cares?
Don't you realize what you're doing?
There's not much here apart from some loot. It just feels like a rest stop for the player if needed. Moving on. Ah, what a lovely location of a bridge and some super mutants. No, really, that's it. Well, kind of. Nearby and underground, you can access an ant pit, and inside you can find the Ant Queen. It also looks like it's between like 2 ant colonies that are fighting each other. You've got the invaders and you've got the foragers. Most of the time the invaders will win considering they're much bigger and stronger than them, but you can help out the foragers if you want. We've got some ant beef going on here. The only thing worth noting is the Ant Queen pheromones and the dead scientist, who seems to have been observing these ants. You can also inject a stim pack into the ant eggs to help them in the future, but this won't make any difference as there is no outcome to this. We are coming to our first broadcast tower. There are a few of these scattered around the place, all of them broadcasting something and all of them having a very similar SOS. Before I approach it though, there is a secret bunker underneath and inside a secret door. This is where we can find 2 Chinese spies. This is where the broadcast was coming from. When we turn on the tower, it will give us a frequency called Signal Sierra Romeo. When listening to it, it will read calling all stations, any stations, this is Sierra Romeo, over. This will be the same on basically every other tower, except the location ID will be different. It's worth coming here for a bit of loot, like the skill book and the mini nuke, and if you like the commando hat. Very close by, you can find a gas station, which have been taken over by Enclave. The only lore about this place is that it got its name from the nearby quarry, as it supplied shale, but that's really about it about this place. I would suspect that this place is just merely a location for the abandoned shack, which inside has a unique sniper rifle inside, behind a very hard lockpick skill. And whoever owned this place did own some radroach pets, which is strange, and I can't forget about the Keller family holotape for later use. Just up the road is a rest stop consisting of a bunch of trucks in a circle. It seems that raiders have been using this place as a little camp. They really didn't want people to come here, as they placed a bunch of mines all over the place. When clearing out the raiders, you can find in a truck a holotape inside. It appears that some truckers leaving the area spotted a mushroom cloud, and it's their reaction towards it.
Come again, come again. Any truckers on this wave? I read you, buddy. Y'all see those clouds? Over. 10-4, it's the commies. Let's circle the wagons. Meet us at the state line on Route 7. You got a deal. I'll pass the word along on my way. Over and out.
But this is cut content technically, and was left out in the released game. It's a cool bit of storytelling, to be honest, so it's a bit weird for them to cut that out. Before it gets dark, there is one more location, is the mass station, and this was used by the Brotherhood of Steel as an outpost, but it looks like it's now been taken over by a pack of raiders, led by a man named Torture. Ensure to take Torture out and his crew for his unique helmet. And within their very hard safe, you can find a Nuka-Cola Quantum and a skill book just outside. Also a quick note, you can make this kind of like a temporary player home as well, as it has the cleanest bed in the wasteland. It's like it won awards or something. All that is known about this place is that it used to be a private school that has now been taken over by super mutants who came from Vault 87. Inside has some interesting level design and features. For example, you can open up into one part of the school where you'll find a few scripted events like this body falling. There is actually some random loot up the top of there, so make sure not to miss that for you hoarders out there. The main part of this building is Dean Dewey, a Protectron with a rather unique interaction. If your intelligence is below 3, they will take you to the special classroom, which is fantastic detail there. This is the only time that your intelligence will matter in Fallout 3. In the other building, we have the Roosevelt Arts and Athletics. Nothing much to be said really, except for the stage here. There's like a little replica of the town, which is pretty cool. And lastly, we have the Roosevelt Library, which can only be accessed if you either have the very hard lockpick skill, or you have to go through the tunnel system underneath the school, which links to all these buildings. The library will have a very strong super mutant with a minigun or something equivalent, and in there you will find a couple of stealth boys and some Nuka-Cola Quantums. It's definitely worth one to explore. The Faded Pumps Estates is next, located very closely to the Academy School. Legit, there is absolutely nothing going on here except for some super mutants. It was clear that this place was a suburban neighborhood, but it got completely wiped out during the Great War, and it's more of just a visual illustration of the devastation of the area. So let's move away from this place momentarily, as I now have the Lawbringer perk, which we now can check out the Regulators HQ, which is only accessible with this perk. In this lonely shack in the middle of nowhere is the HQ of the lawmen and women of the Capital Wasteland. And according to the Fallout 3 game guide, this faction is just 10 years old, and their purpose is to take out anyone evil and try to restore peace to the wasteland. This includes you, by the way, if you have evil karma. It's a pretty standard shack with their leader Sonora Cruz, who deals with any transactions with you. She requests that you gather any fingers of every evil person you kill for some caps. This means every raider and every Enclave member. This is a brilliant money-making machine here. Plus you get some good karma, which I really need, because then I'm able to obtain this big guy. Moving back to the east once again, we can find the Silver Lining Drive-In. There's one purpose for this area, and that's just to blow up the cars, to get rid of the raiders loitering in the area. That's about it. There is a random encounter here, so your experience may differ. The Drowned Devil Crossing is next, and it's just a destroyed bridge with a couple of raiders just vibing around the place. There's nothing too interesting happening here. As we keep moving north, you'll find a couple of shacks that looks like super mutants have been using as a camp. And with every super mutant camp, you'll find a captive here. This place can be used as an unofficial home, as there is places to stash loot, but that's probably a really bad idea considering that super mutants will keep spawning back here. Though fun fact, this place is based off the real location, also called Mason-Dixon, bordering Pennsylvania and the Maryland states.
I'm alive!
We have another broadcast station, but this one looks rather important, as we have 3 broadcast towers at this location. But we will discover that there isn't actually much here. Of course, you can turn the broadcast on as always, giving you a similar message as the previous broadcast tower. The main part of this location isn't actually directly here, but actually on the road near here, as you can find an explosive bobblehead that is located in a cistern just outside. Very close by, we can find a rather destroyed chapel, and inside a rather unique character. This place is currently occupied by a rogue sniper on the leftover parts of the top floor. He also holds a unique sniper rifle called the Reservist Rifle, which only seems to hold 3 sniper bullets. On his body, he holds a special holotape about some Oasis coordinates, which is a secret settlement way up north. So it seems like he used to be part of this settlement, probably most likely exiled from the place. Apart from that, you can find some sniper ammo and a skill book for your troubles. Just south of here, you can find a campground. There's nothing here, okay? It seems that there were people around here, maybe some raiders, but they probably didn't stick around. That's probably a good reason, because just nearby is the Deathclaw Sanctuary. Now, why would someone come here? Well, it holds some of the best loot in the game, which I would hope so considering this is one of the most dangerous locations in the Capital Wasteland. If you progressed far enough in the story, you might run into some Enclave forces nearby. It looks like they've been capturing Deathclaws in cages and even putting some like mind-controlled devices on them. Inside you'll find Deathclaws everywhere, and I mean everywhere. Alongside them are the remains of mercenaries, raiders, and traders. Basically anyone that wasn't too careful because they probably dragged them here and to eat them. Lovely. But what's the really good loot here? Well, you can find a unique Gatling laser gun called the Vengeance, and you can find a unique Ripper called Jack. There's also an endurance bobblehead tucked away inside as well, which seems to really fit this environment. And no, unfortunately, you will not be able to find the Babe Magnet glasses, as that's a mod, unfortunately. We're back at it again with the broadcast towers, and of course you can turn this one on for another Morse code. And just underneath is a secret tunnel, or it looks like an underground bunker, just a small one. It does look like someone tried to get in, but failed miserably. And there's a couple bits of loot like a skill book and a pre-war book, but that's about it. Moving on. Remember the SATCOM arrays? Well, here's another one. And surprisingly, even though they were really close to Raven Rock, this one isn't occupied by the Enclave. It's actually been taken over by the Talon Company. According to the terminal entries that you can find here, it's actually run by a female ghoul who actually hired the Talon Company to protect her project. But what was her goal here? Well, it seems like she's discovered an orbital military satellite, and she wants to basically rain down nuclear fire down on the Capital Wasteland. Now, why would she want to do that? Well, it's not particularly clear, but considering she hired one of the most evil companies to protect her, let's just say I'm pretty sure her intentions were not good. At the top of the SATCOM array, you can find a terminal where you can see that it is connected to a pre-war military satellite that's still in orbit. She managed to access one of them called High Water Trousers, but her problem was that the orbital position was directly above her, so she really didn't want to use it. And that's where you step in. If you're feeling quite destructive, you can access this yourself and enjoy a bit of the wasteland fireworks from the sky. The next location we're heading towards is probably one of the most influential places in the wasteland, but we can't access it yet, because to do that we need to find 4 special keys. One from Alistair Tenpenny,
Hello!
one from Dave, one from a chem addict in Rivet City, and one from a drunk wastelander.
What? Fuck!
Now since Dave is all the way up the top right of the map, we'll start in that direction. But first I need to make a stop at the Temple of the Union. The Temple of the Union is sort of a temporary refuge for runaway slaves who have taken shelter inside these old ruins. They've been able to turn this place into a bit of a safe haven where escaped slaves can regroup and plan their next move. Inside you'll find the head of Abraham Lincoln's statue. Yes, the actual head from the Lincoln Memorial. Their leader, Hannibal Hamlin, wants to reach the Lincoln Memorial and fully restore it. He wants to send a message to the slavers and the Capital Wasteland that these slaves are free. But unfortunately, the Lincoln Memorial is already under control of slavers from Paradise Falls. With this information, you can choose how things unfold. You can either warn Hannibal and prepare for a fight, or you can betray him and inform the slavers, who will then come here to attack the temple directly. It is also worth mentioning that Hannibal is very interested in the Lincoln-related items, but he does not offer the best price in comparison to other collectors. Now, I just want to talk about one issue that I have with this place. See, Bethesda made it so you can't actually fast travel out of this place, kind of like if you were in an interior, and you actually have to walk down the road a little bit before you can actually leave. I'm not really sure why this is a thing, but I can imagine that this is so that you can't just leave the temple. And that's because Hannibal tells you not to betray him and his people, and so you are not allowed to leave until you say your promises. But you can just jump out the window. So, I don't really know what you're doing there, Bethesda. Also, you're expecting blind faith from a random stranger you met like 30 seconds ago? It's just insane. It's stupid. It's so stupid. Just up north from here is Dot's Diner, which is also called Grizzly's Diner. It's clear that they don't want anyone near this entrance as it's covered in mines, and inside there's a bunch of traps as well. It doesn't seem very inhabitable. If you loiter around long enough though, a group of raiders will come to ambush you, from the front and the back. But it is worth checking out this place as you can find some good loot here and another valuable Keller holotape. From the close distance from the diner, you can find another one of those broadcast towers. Here is where you can find a random encounter location, and of course another frequency.
But that Deathclaw cured me of my itch for wasteland adventure.
This one you actually have to follow the frequency signal strength, and if you follow it correctly, you will stumble into a drainage hole. Inside is a little bunker with 2 skeletons. The message on the frequency says something about a father in need of a doctor for their sick son. But when you check the bunker, you'll find the parents' skeletons, but no son, leaving it a mystery on what really happened to him. As we get closer to Dave's location, we can stumble onto a dilapidated farm, which has of course been taken by raiders. The only unique feature about this place is that you can enter a silo and reach the top if you wanted to. There's also a skill book as well. It's just a pretty standard location. Hey look, another power station! Apart from some standard loot, there isn't really anything interesting that happens here. It does spawn a random encounter though, so who knows? Who knows what's gonna happen to you?
It sure is shiny. I'm not sure I like it though.
At the very top of the Capital Wasteland, you'll find a tiny settlement known as the Republic of Dave. Now, according to the official game guide, and that you can find in-game, this place has gone through many name changes. Starting with the Kingdom of Larry, Republic of Stevie Ray, Billsylvania, Kingdom of Tom, and now it is the Republic of Dave. I know, truly riveting political history we've got right here. When it was called the Kingdom of Tom, this would be Dave's father, and due to unknown reasons, he would actually kick his own son out, where Dave would then later become a mercenary in the Wasteland, which is how he got this special key. He then later returned, overthrew Tom, and established what he proudly calls a democracy. The Republic of Dave has its own economy, immigration policy, military, and a government. His army consists of army of 2, and the democratic process is held once a year, though Dave has conveniently structured things so he almost always wins. There is a main quest that you can do here, which revolves around an election that's actually coming up, and this is where you can tamper with the ballot box or get someone else involved as a candidate, and if Dave loses, he just storms off like a child into the wasteland and heads off to Old Olney, which is an abandoned nearby town. But we're unfortunately not going to be doing that, as we really need that key. Before leaving, make sure to grab the perception bobblehead located inside the settlement. And now that we've got the final key, it is time to head back to Fort Constantine. Fort Constantine is a pre-war military installation that was used as a high-security storage facility. It is housed to a bunch of atomic munitions and classified military research, including experimental technology such as the T-51B power armor. In 2277, Alistair Tenpenny funded an expedition of 5 mercenaries to retrieve a so-called secret weapon from the base. Now this is where things get a little bit interesting. The official Fallout 3 guide suggests that the target was the T-51B power armor, but if that was true, then why is it still sitting when we arrive? That would imply that the mission has failed. However, when we go and speak to Dukov about it, he said we went in for the gun and that he got it.
Tenpenny hired us as mercs. He wanted some fancy f***ing gun.
Which suggests that they did retrieve something. So my conclusion is that they probably secured the weapon somewhere else in the base, but didn't retrieve the T-51B power armor. Which would make sense because the main guy that gives you the quest for the Fort Independence, Mr. Crowley, was really interested in this power armor. That is why he asks you to find these 4 keys so you can give it to him and he can go and get it. And according to him as well, Dukov actually betrayed him in the mission, locking him and another merc inside of a secured area so he can claim a larger share of the payment. The feral ghouls of course killed the other merc but spared Crowley, likely because he's a ghoul himself. But that betrayal is the big reason for him holding that grudge. Now for Fort Constantine itself, there's 3 main sections. One contains the bomb storage area filled with a bunch of intact nuclear warheads. Another section is the CO quarters, where you can find a big guns bobblehead. And finally, the most important section is the restricted research armory, which requires all 4 special keys to access. Inside is the T-51B power armor. This is the best armor in terms of protection in the game, not including the DLCs. But this is peak power armor right here. This is OG Fallout 1 power armor. There's also a solid armory section packed with some high-end loot, making this whole journey worth it for that premium gear. We are finally on our last SATCOM array. This one seems to be filled with raiders, and to be honest, it looks pretty cool with their decorations from a distance. What makes this location quite memorable though, is the environmental storytelling. Inside and around the array, you can find a few wacky setups, such as this chessboard made from bottles, dominoes lined up using beer bottles, a giant teddy bear display, and we can't forget about the iconic door. According to the developer commentary, this was actually made because they didn't have enough time to make an interior, so they just stuck this here. I would like to let everyone know that this is the last power station. I know you're sad, but all good things must come to an end. Yeah, there's just not much going on here. You can find a skill book and a bottle cap mine. That's about it. In the middle of nowhere, you can find an abandoned water treatment plant, which was used as a reservoir for the northern part of DC. Now, this place is crawling with raiders, because of course it is, and the water is unfortunately irradiated, so there's no use there. We can now also celebrate that this is the last broadcast tower too. There's nothing really around it, and the location of where this broadcast was coming from is found in an underground hole, which you can find a big book of science. Next stop is this lovely settlement with all its glory. Yeah, it's a destroyed place, like it's completely wiped out by the blast. A random encounter does spawn here, so your experience might be different. And there is also an enclave patrol nearby. In the barn, you can find a personal footlocker which requires a very hard lockpick, or you can find a key nearby the burnt out bus. It's probably most likely used by a scavenger or whoever actually lives here. Before the Great War, this place was a shopping center. Now, it still sells things, just not appliances. Paradise Falls is the main slaver headquarters in Fallout 3, run by an organized group of slavers under the command of Eulogy Jones. The business model is simple: bring in people and get paid. The more valuable the target, the bigger the reward. The slavers are ruthless. They will enslave men, women, and even children. In fact, they can even task you with capturing children from Little Lamplight. Fallout 3 absolutely does not hold back when it comes to giving you an option to be evil. The interesting part about the slavers is that they have been known to not be bothered by other factions, such as the Brotherhood of Steel or the Talon Company, making the slavers' job pretty easy to capture people. When you first arrive, a guard named Grouse will stop you at the gate. This is where you have a few options to get in. You either have an evil karma yourself, you pay up 500 caps, or you enslave specific targets that they're interested in. One such target is Arkansas, the sniper at Minefield. And if you remember his story, I can understand why they want to get him. If you accept this quest, they will give you a unique weapon called the Mesmetron. This will temporarily disorientate a target so you can fit on a slave collar on them. Yes, you can actually roleplay as a slaver if you want to. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to put that as the video. Once you're in, you'll be welcomed by a slave trying to escape, only to find his head explode due to the collar. Oh, lovely. Inside Paradise Falls, there are several notable locations. You have the weapons dealer, the slaver barracks, a clinic, and Eulogy Jones's pad. Inside the barracks, you can find a unique vault suit owned by a lone survivor and, well, the only guy in Vault 77. This vault is famously known as the 1 man and 1,000 boxes of puppets. On the holotape right next to the vault suit, it explains about a dude who went psycho and is now looking for this suit.
Not a stranger with no name. Just
get
rid of the damn thing.
It's a shame because we'll never actually experience Vault 77, so this is just a mere reference of some lore outside of the Capital Wasteland. Inside the cinema is Eulogy Jones, the leader of the slavers. It is here that you can buy your own slave named Clover, who can only be obtained via evil karma, and 1,000 caps of course. And on the table is a speech bobblehead. Behind the stairs you can find a shipment of Nuka-Cola and a bunch of Quantum. Right at the back of Paradise Falls is the slave pen. This is where you can speak to some kids about rescuing them. This is linked to the quest for Little Lamplight if you didn't pass the speech check or have the Child at Heart perk. Paradise Falls may be a relatively small location on the map, but it holds a surprising amount of lore, moral choices, and unique characters. In fact, if you have evil karma, they will actually gift you stuff for visiting, very similar to Megaton if you have good karma. But for this playthrough, I think it's best just to bring them some justice and just get rid of them all.
Freedom! Now's our chance.
I don't know where the clinic is.
Up on the cliffs, hidden from the world, is a small and colourful settlement from the pre-war mine called Oasis. The only place in the Capital Wasteland where you will see full green trees and bushes. At the centre of it all is Harold, a returning character from Fallout 1 and 2. And contrary to popular belief, Harold isn't actually a ghoul. He was actually exposed to the FEV before the events of the first game, which caused him to mutate over time. He just kind of looked like a ghoul and then eventually became this. What started as a small branch growing on his head, which he named Bob, eventually became a full tree. And by the time we find him in Fallout 3, he's completely rooted to the ground, fused with the tree and physically immobile. A group of Wastelanders discovered him and began worshipping him as a god due to the lush vegetation growing around him. They called themselves the Tree Minders, led by Tree Father Birch. They believe Harold is a divine being, bringing life back to the wasteland. When you arrive, they insist that you be cleansed before meeting him, as they see outsiders as spiritually impure. And just like Bethesda fashion, every time you wake up, you get the classic Skyrim intro treatment.
Glad to see you're finally awake.
So, you're awake.
You're finally awake.
And he just gets straight onto the point of wanting to die. Bro's been stuck here for such a long time, he just doesn't see his life anymore. Now this is where you can make a moral choice. You could be a real bastard and put him on fire. Or you could go into the cave system and find his heart and kill him from there. But before you go there, the two elders of the Tree Minders will have an argument about what is best for Harold. They will give you some sap that would either halt his growth so that Oasis can be remained isolated and controlled, or we can choose to accelerate his growth so it can be spread across the wasteland. In the caves, there are plenty of loot to be found. If you look hard enough, especially underwater, you can find some really decent loot. And right at the end of the cave system, you can reach his heart. You can either apply the sap, or you can destroy his heart. If you kill Harold on request, Father Tree Birch will be saddened, but Harold will leave behind comforting words that will help the Tree Minders accept what happened. Now, in my opinion, I think the best route for this is to accelerate his growth, because he kind of feels like a Gek, but in a natural form. but I can't imagine being a tree for like thousands of years stuck to the ground doing nothing, because what sort of life is that? So what would be the best moral thing to do? Well, I guess that's up for interpretation. Also up in the cliffs nearby, we can find a small settlement, which looks like it's been taken over by super mutants. The only thing really interesting about this location is the unique weapon found inside one of the shacks, called the Board of Education, which is essentially just a unique nail on a board. How exciting. You can also find a skill book in each shack, which is a nice bonus as well. Also, a completely different side note, I just went to go check how many locations are in Fallout 4. Yeah, there's 325 locations. That's just not gonna happen unless someone out there wants to hear me rant for 6 hours. I hope there isn't. Moving slightly south, there is a quite isolated location called the Greener Pasture Disposal Site. This is maybe one of the largest radiation places in the game. This place is just filled with toxic waste. It's clear that it wasn't very contained very well, and according to the game guide, this was before the Great War. So someone made a big whoopsie over here, and there are 2 interiors that can be found here. One being the building at the end, which is a sort of office space, which does contain a bobblehead and a skill book. And right in the middle of all the radiation is a makeshift home? Who would want to stay here? Maybe this guy was trying to take shelter from something, only to perish due to the radiation poisoning. Why would he take off his radiation suit? I guess we will never truly know the story. Just before reaching the town, which seems to be filled with deathclaws, just gonna run from them, we can find Vault 92. This vault had a particular group of people in it. Earlier in game, at Agatha's house, she mentions that one of her ancestors were offered a place in this special vault designed to preserve the world's greatest musicians. Vault 292 was marketed as a cultural preservation project, a sort of sanctuary to protect the elite musical talent after the bombs fell. But of course, this is Vault Tech. When the Great War began, the vault was sealed for 100 years as instructed. The musicians were given dedicated practice areas, recording studios, and soundproofed rooms. Everything just seemed normal at first, then became the real purpose of the vault, the white noise mind suggestion experiment. Low-level white noise signals were secretly piped through the vault's audio systems with the goal to study subliminal, suggestion, and behavioral manipulation. At first, the exposure was subtle and controlled. Isolated test rooms, padded environments, the studio headphones. The results showed increased aggression and behavioral instability. Encouraged by earlier data, the experiments expanded vault-wide, and that's when things started to collapse. Dwellers began showing severe neurological symptoms, loss of motor control, cognitive decline, paranoia, violent outbursts, and eventually full psychosis. Autopsies revealed neurological degradation linked to prolonged exposure to the white noise frequencies. The scientists grew alarmed and urged the Overseer to shut down the system. But the Overseer knew this all along. It was actually authorized from the beginning, and by the time the staff realized the full extent of the exposure, it was already too late. The entire vault has been continuously subjected to the signals, even during sleep, and as paranoia and violence escalated, the vault descended into chaos. A conflict broke out between the staff and dwellers, and by the end, most of the inhabitants were either killed or driven completely insane. Years later, structural decay worsened as it was very close to water, and will eventually cause flooding at the lower levels of the vault. When you arrive, the bottom sections will be completely filled with Mirelurks. The main item of interest here is the unique Stradivarius violin, locked inside a sound testing chamber, and this belonged to Agatha's ancestor. You can return it back to her, and in exchange, she will give you the radio frequency, allowing you to listen to some classical violin performances while wandering the wasteland. Okay, so what about the town next to Vault 92? We've already met the locals of the town. Nice lovely folk. And well, you can see it's pretty destroyed. Apparently a group of mercs tried to use this place, but that's when a pack of deathclaws moved in and ruined their plans. I accidentally fell into the sewers where there's more deathclaws that can be found. Though it wasn't all bad because you can find a mini nuke and a fat man if you scavenge hard enough, and then you can exit through one of the ladders. Also remember Dave? He's the one that wants to come over here to set up like a new version of Republic of Dave in Old Olney with the Deathclaws. Yeah, good luck with that one, buddy. But speaking of towns, let's actually go to an actual thriving one east of the map. As soon as we get to the town, we are immediately introduced to a little showdown between two people in costumes, the Mechanist and the Antagonizer. They battle it out, obviously the robot's winning, and then they shove off back to their layers like a couple of comic book characters. This is peak Fallout right here. After the chaos settles, we meet Uncle Ro, the founder and leader of Canterbury Commons. He established this settlement in 2258 with the goal of creating a centralized trading hub for the Wasteland's major caravan companies. And for a while this actually worked. And then came the Antagonizer, real name Tanya Christoph. She became obsessed with ants and adopted a comic book supervillain persona, believing humanity is a plague on the Wasteland. Her goal was to attack the town and disrupt trade and stability. The town's mechanic, Scott Walensky, lost his favorite robot during one of her raids, and in response, he built himself a suit of armor, adopted a superhero identity, and became the Mechanist to defend the town. Now, if anyone claims Fallout is like this ultra serious and grounded game, just remember this quest, please. Fun fact, Maura Brown, the shopkeeper at Megaton, actually grew up here, according to the official game guide. And that's where she developed her trading instincts and mechanical skills. The more you know. Here's another one for you. Derek, Uncle Ro's son, actually possesses a key to the Republic of Dave, which means that this kid is apparently traveling across one of the most dangerous parts of the map just to go visit his friends. Either he's incredibly brave or he gets incredibly lucky each time. While you're here, you can invest caps into Uncle Ro's caravan network. Paying for these upgrades improves their inventory quality to the traveling merchants. It's definitely worth it if you're hoarding thousands of caps. During development, Canterbury Commons was reportedly intended to feel more like a crowded bazaar and a much more active trading hub, but what we got was a small version of it. Not even that, which is a huge shame, but totally understandable from a technical standpoint. Now, these comic book goofballs, where are they hiding? Well, the closest one is here, at the Antagonizer's lair. And this is where she plans her dramatic war against Canterbury Commons. Right at the entrance, the place is rigged up with mines, traps, tripwires. She clearly just doesn't want anyone near her. And as you descend deeper, the tunnels are absolutely crawling with giant ants. Now you're probably asking, Gloomy, was she controlling these ants to do her bidding? We don't actually know. However, for the hardcore fans of Fallout, there is a theory that she could actually be a psyker. Yes, psykers actually exist in the Fallout universe. They show up in the Fallout tactics under Beast Lords, who are in control of mutant animals. Now this is of course not 100% lore accurate in Fallout 3, however this is in the Fallout universe and yet to be retconned. Or she's just using Queen Ant pheromones. Bethesda, why didn't you explain this? As we come to the end of the tunnels, you'll see her sitting on her throne. Now you can try talking to her, that she basically has issues, or there's another option. You can pick up a Nuka-Cola Quantum, and of course her costume if you want to look goofy in the Wasteland. Moving to the Mechanist place, our hero is using an abandoned robot repair center for his lair, which I think is quite fitting for him. This place used to be called Darren's Discounts before the war, and looking around it, it appears to be a rather big center for all types of robots. The main part of the building seems to be protected by a group of robots and turrets, most likely created by the Mechanist to keep himself protected. If you have a good enough repair skill, you can just skip all the robots mayhem and just reach the top of the Mechanist's forge. You will find one of 2 Nuka grenades in the base game, which can be found on this workbench here, plus a skill book. Of course you can speak to the Mechanist, but as we've already dealt with the Antagonizer, we're basically done here. And with all that goofiness out of the way, let's go south a little to a lovely old place called the Wheaton Armory. This is an old military base during the pre-war era, and now it seems that the raiders have taken over the place. See, when raiders take over places like this, I just think this is how they get their big heavy weapons, like the sniper rifles, the miniguns, the missile launchers, because they probably looted military places like this. You can probably see the Enclave fighting these raiders nearby, but considering one of the raiders has a missile launcher, they might actually win the fight. It seems that the surface level are in ruins, but inside there's an underground bunker, but it looks like there's a bit of a radiation problem, probably due to a nuke still being here in the base, or what's left of one. Right at the bottom of the silo is an armory which requires a very hard lockpick skill or 100 in science. Inside is an untapped armory with big guns, ammo, everything your little heart desires. This is definitely worth looting if you have these skills. And slowly moving back to the DC ruins is the Bethesda ruins. Unfortunately, this is not linked to Bethesda, like I used to think when I was younger. It's mainly just parts of the town in Bethesda, Maryland. Not even a little Easter egg Bethesda? No? Okay. Just like 60% of the wasteland, this place is also taken by raiders. They seem to have barricaded parts of the town and even threw a couple of mines for a lonely wanderer to step on. There are 2 buildings accessible in this place, namely just called Offices West and East. This seems to be where the raiders live and chill. And I quite like this place because there's a really interesting trap here. It's worth taking a look for some decent loot and for a couple of skill books, and the teddy bear on the hook. Make sure to pick that up. There is also the lockpick bobblehead to be picked up in the east section of the building. That will go towards the collection. To the side, we can find the metro tunnel, which is just filled with ghouls. That's really about it. They sometimes come out to cause trouble with the raiders, but the rest will stay inside. All the way east of the Bethesda ruins is the Corvega factory. You know those cars that we see and explode for fun? Well, most of those are owned by Chrysler Motors, which, by the way, announced that the price of this car was $199,999. What a bargain. It's a shame that due to popularity their quality would drop and had reports of coolant dripping out of it, which probably explains why they explode so easily. Back to the factory, it seems that this place isn't filled with raiders, but with ants. And with a lot of ants comes with a big ol' ant queen, which was a bit of a jump scare for me. This is definitely one of the more interesting places to visit. To the south of this location and the outskirts of the DC ruins, around the metro station, we can find a raider camp, and it seems that they have been protecting themselves against some super mutants due to all the bodies around the place. Inside the metro tunnels, it will lead back to Chevy Chase, and if this is your first or second playthrough, you probably will accidentally stumble into this location. Well, at least from my experience. I'm sorry, I made a promise to myself that I would never come back here ever. All you need to know is that there's Mirelurks here, and an absolutely massive cave complex. If you want to know why I hate this place, here's the video for reference. Fuck this place. Moving on. Not far from the Corvega factory, you can find the Chrysler building, the former corporate headquarters of Chrysler Motors Corporation. This was their head office behind the Corvega line of nuclear-powered cars. Pre-war America was on full promotional swing for these, pushing their retro-futuristic cars into the masses. And then the bombs dropped. Fast forward 200 years, and the building is now occupied by super mutants. And not just by a few. This place has a heavy mutant presence, including multiple centaurs. These are often accompanied by super mutants as their version of attack dogs. But what makes this building just feel slightly different than the others? It's just the way certain rooms are set up. The centaurs are confined to these specific areas. I couldn't find any lore regarding why they were like this, or it could just be my head making stuff up. But it definitely feels a lot more organized, almost an experiment vibe to it. There is plenty of loot to be found here. Skill books, quantum, stealth boys. It's a rather big building to explore, but also has a lot of good loot. Just watch out for the traps around. Oh, and there's also this in the toilets. Bethesda just seems to really be obsessed with things in the toilets. The National Guard depot has surprisingly held up quite well after 200 years of nuclear devastation. And while parts of the structure are destroyed, the main facility remains structurally solid, which makes sense given that it was designed as a fortified military installation. As soon as you enter, you'll notice the base is still defended by active security systems. Protectrons, turrets, and automated defenses are still operational. If you're exploring after the Waters of Life quest, you may see a couple of vertibirds flying overhead. This is a nice little bit of world building in my opinion, and definitely a nice touch. On one side there is an interior that can be accessed into, which brings us into the training room. The main area consists of the shooting range, which leads into the offices, and eventually a room that has a switch that opens into the real crown jewel of this place, that being the armory. Inside, this is where you'll find every weapon type with plenty of ammo and explosives, and right in the middle is a small guns bobblehead. The last thing here is the sealed bunker door, which requires the 5 Keller family holotapes to unlock. These holotapes are scattered across the wasteland, and once you have collected all 5, the bunker will open. Or you can just do this. Inside is a glowing ghoul, most likely the Keller father, probably stuck here for 200 years, just rotting away. Once he's cleared, you'll have access to the best weapon in the game, the experimental MIRV. It shoots 8 nukes at a time. So if you like fun, then this will definitely pique your interest. We have come to our final vault of the Capital Wasteland, and one of the fan favorite locations because of one simple thing: Gary.
Ah, Gary.
The vault is crawling with Garys, but it wasn't always like this. It was already a failed vault in the first place, as it was supposed to hold 375 dwellers, but due to work stoppages before the bombs dropped, it led to a lot of shortcuts. The main interest here is the cloning labs, more specifically human cloning. The first experiment would be on Gary. OG Gary, that is. Scientists just repeatedly cloned him, but each new iteration showed increasing psychological instability. The clones would then become more aggressive and less coherent over time. Terminal logs describe the escalating violence, failed containment attempts, and eventually loss of total control. They decided to clone Gary 54 times before realizing, yeah, this just isn't gonna work. The last note explains that a room was just filled with Gary clones, and after the last Gary clone was made, they were able to injure the lead scientist. They did plan on killing all the Garys, but when we arrive, we can see that some of them are still left over. A total of 12 Garys are still vibing in Vault 108, just saying to each other. Me personally, I wanted to see more Garys, so I just wanted to see what that was like.
Gary! Gary!
Ah, music to my ears.
Now I release you.
It is here where you can find the Charisma bobblehead, which is kind of ironic really. There are a couple of skill books around and some stealth boys. With the last vault explored, let's move away from this area and back to Tenpenny Tower to find south of the map the Cliffside Caverns. Some raiders have decided to set up a little base inside this cave, but little did they realize this was also a Yaoguai cave. When exploring the place, you can see that they tried to deal with the mutated bears, but instead of expanding, they just placed a bunch of mines to protect themselves. This is where you can find the schematic to the nuka grenade, so it's worth picking up if you like collectibles. The Overlook Drive-In. 4 words: blow up the cars. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Please subscribe. Tucked away in the Capital Wasteland is Andale, a settlement that feels like it's trying really hard to preserve the image of the pre-war suburban America. The houses are tidy, the residences are polite, welcoming, and they even offer you some food for free. But don't you dare look into this mysterious shack over here. If you feel like there's an uncanny vibe here, then your instincts would be right. Andale is home to 2 long-standing families who turned to cannibalism generations ago when food was scarce. What may have started as desperation slowly became tradition.
I work to feed my family just like every red-blooded American man should.
Fathers passed it on to their sons, mothers to daughters, and by the time you arrive, it's just simply how things are done. The families also avoid bringing in outsiders permanently, which has led to heavy intermarriage over the years. The town's isolation has kept their secret intact and kept their bloodlines very contained, if you know what I mean. If you speak to the elderly resident, Old Man Harris, he tells you to leave the town as soon as possible because everyone here is an absolute psycho, and even tells you to go and visit the mysterious shack. And that is when you discover that they've been munching on humans like a bunch of zombies. There's human remains, skeletons, fridges stocked with suspicious meat, and when you leave the place, they all swarm you to interrogate you. Luckily with the cannibal perk, you can reveal yourself as someone who shares their dietary preferences. This unlocks a unique comedic dialogue and even earns you a strange meat pie from one of the wives. Isn't that nice of them?
Do this, or you're such terrible people, or please not me, I have a kid in Rivet City. Well, I have kids too.
Once you finish that little quest, there isn't really much left to do here, which is a major shame because I felt like they could have done a lot more with this place. Not too far away from here, we can come across one of the most recognizable brands in the Fallout universe, Nuka-Cola. This is, of course, the Nuka-Cola plant, one of the main facilities where the famous soda was produced before the Great War. Considering how iconic Nuka-Cola is, you'd expect inside to see a bunch of Nuka-Colas stacked to the roof, but unfortunately that's not what you'll find. There are a couple of empty bottles scattered around the outside, so maybe scavengers have picked the place clean. But still, you would think there would be so much more left. There's not even any Nuka-Cola Quantum around, which is very, very strange. The plant itself is fairly large, splitting across 4 main levels. Down on the factory floor, you can find it guarded by robots that are still fulfilling their duty and protecting the place. There is an interesting interaction you can have on the production line where you can actually activate the Nuka-Cola machines, but unfortunately it will break after 5 seconds. But you can take the Nuka-Colas that it does create. Further up in the offices, this is where you can learn their marketing for the Nuka-Cola and the new Nuka-Cola Quantum. Funny story, there's actually a skeleton here with a note that reads that one of the robots locked him in there as like a punishment because he took a longer break than he should have, and it looks like he never made it out. You can also find a body with a contract about finding a Nuka-Cola Clear formula, which is sort of the main prize of being here. Next is the storage and mixing vats, which seems like there was a major leak here, and it looks like it's been merged with the Nuka-Cola Quantum as the water has turned blue, which explains why these Mirelurks are also blue. Lastly, we have the research and development area, and this is where we can grab a key to unlock the safe for the Nuka-Cola Clear formula. Now we just need to take the Nuka-Cola Clear formula to a certain location, which is coming up very soon. But heading nearby Andale, there is a town called Fairfax. A group of raiders have taken over the place and using the metro tunnels as a base, as well as the surface. They have also rigged up the place with mines to anyone that may be curious about exploring the area. They also use it to know if anyone's coming, as this is such a wide area. But it looks like they're having a little bit of an issue because right next door is Fort Independence, which is the main HQ for the Brotherhood Outcasts. When you arrive, you'll see a raider scout party attacking the building, but this is straight up a death sentence because the outcasts are way too well equipped for them. We've touched on the outcasts before, but to recap, they're basically a breakaway group from the Brotherhood of Steel chapter in the Capital Wasteland. They split off because they disagreed with Elder Lyons' new direction, and with Lyons wanted to use the Brotherhood resources to protect the Wasteland civilians, but the outcasts believed that this went against the Brotherhood's original mission, which was to recover, preserve, and protect advanced technology, not to save random Wastelanders. And because of that ideological conflict, they left and formed their own faction, continuing the traditional Brotherhood doctrine. Now, surprisingly, knowing that, they aren't actually that hostile to you. You can ask them to do some work for them. Protector Castin offers you a repeatable job where you collect advanced technology and bring it back to them. This includes things like energy weapons, Enclave power armor, plasma rifles, and any high-tech equipment. After the Enclave appear in the main story, this becomes especially easy since their soldiers carry all those types of things that the outcast wants. And in exchange, they will reward you with supplies like ammo, grenades, stim packs, and eventually you will gain their trust to get inside Fort Independence. Now on the surface level, it looks quite underwhelming. Entrances and offices look very disappointing, but if you explore further, you'll discover their underground bunker. Down there is where their real operation is, including a clinic, armory, living quarters, and research and development sections. It's pretty evident they were quite lucky to find this location. Inside you can find some really good loot. This includes a unique missile launcher called the Miss Launcher, along with mini nukes, high-end weapons, and if you have the alien blaster, there's a couple of alien cells there. This is definitely worth the effort to get into this place. Remember that contract regarding the Nuka-Cola Clear? Well, this is where we're going to drop it off. We can meet up with a gang known as the Sudden Death Overtime Raiders. They seem to be obsessed with hockey and treat it like this very violent sport of the past. For some reason, they really wanted this Nuka-Cola formula, and other than trading it for some caps, there isn't any other practical use for it. Not even Sierra is interested in it, which is insane.
Let's get out of here.
But let's move on to the Red Racer factory itself. This is a factory that produced Red Racer tricycles, which you may have seen scattered across the wasteland as junk. When you first enter, it feels like a standard abandoned factory, except it's inhabited by feral ghouls. Not something we haven't already seen, except one little thing. When they die, their heads explode, even when you don't shoot them in the head. And this happens consistently, which immediately tells you there's something unusual going on here. As you explore deeper into the factory, you begin to hear an ominous noise. On a couple of terminals, it will show that there is a couple of sound frequencies being used here, and it looks like these frequencies are responsible for causing these ghouls' heads to explode. The experiment's also being used against super mutants, and deactivating the system can instantly kill them, remotely. Inside the CEO room is an insane surgeon with a missile launcher. And after taking him out, the only one left is Stefan, the ghoul who looks like he's been experimented on. It seems like this noise frequency is very similar to the Dunwich obelisk, and maybe it's just like a placeholder noise. But looking into one of the terminals, it explains about a mind control chip. You know, very similar to the one in the Fallout TV show. The last location before going all the way around to Arlington Library again is the flooded metro. This is also a very iconic area because this is the place where Todd Howard himself played Fallout 3 at E3. Just sidetracking a bit here, I loved it when they presented it like this. Like there was no fancy presentation, it was just Todd Howard with an Xbox 360 controller and his horrible aim. Because who cares, it was Fallout. Looking inside the flooded metro, it's, well, flooded. So of course there's going to be mireworks. It can also be accessed back out through the Mason district, but we'll come on to that a bit later. The only notable thing about this place really is the unique power fist called the Shocker. It's a pretty good weapon for an unarmed build. As we head up back to the Super Duper Mart, there is a big factory where a conveyor belt can be found with a bunch of teddy bears. And it looks like someone has done a lot of weird stuff with these bears. It contains every single sin imaginable, from alcohol to meds to weapons. Someone's clearly just messing with you at this point. Near the center of the building is a sewer. It's a bit strange to have a sewer inside a factory, but if we follow the sewer line, you will find a bunch of ghouls, and even a special ghoul called Gallo. And he has a big interest in Nuka-Cola. I don't know where he got all this Nuka-Cola merch from, but it's definitely a cool little home. On his person, he does have a key, which gives you access to his storage room. This is 100% worth doing if you like schematic weapons, as it has every piece of junk that you need to make one. This place will then lead back closely to where the Citadel is, but we don't need to go there, because our next location is going to be at the settlement called Grey Ditch. Before the Great War, it used to be a rather rich area, and now it has been left in ruins. Only 7 people lived here at this place, but they soon had to evacuate due to a bit of an ant problem. But these aren't just your normal ants, these are fire ants. Most likely you would have been approached by a kid who was scared of these monsters and tell you to go and visit Grey Ditch because he wants you to find his father. Inside his home, you can definitely find him alright. After you tell him about the bad news, he asks if you can destroy all the ants and find out where the main problem is, which will eventually lead you to the local metro station, Marigold Station. Here is where you can find a lot more ants and a lone scientist with the most alpha male voice possible.
Well, you startled me.
It turns out that he is the one who genetically modified these ants, and it's just kind of got out of hand. He said he wasn't trying to harm anybody. In fact, he wanted to modify the ants so they go back to their original size. But of course, it went the opposite way. And the more he experimented, the worse it got, eventually leading them to breathe fire. Good work, man. You can go check out the Fire Queen yourself down in the cave system where he's been monitoring it. Now, I personally believe you should just get rid of this because he's failed this much. Who knows what damage he could do in the future. Also, why is this rocket launcher so bad? What is this?
How could you do such a thing?
With the fire ants sorted, you can go speak to the kid again to help him find a new home. But who has time for that? We've got more locations to explore. If we follow the metro tunnels near Wellman's Wharf, we'll eventually reach the Arlington area of the DC ruins. More specifically, this leads to the Arlington Cemetery, and as the name suggests, the entire location is a massive pre-war graveyard. Once you enter this area, and if you have the Lawbringer perk, you can also find evidence of a battle between regulators and some raiders nearby, including a body of the regulator, showing that he's been looking for someone specific. This brings us to Junder's Plunkett, a unique raider who lives in the Arlington house at the top of the hill. He is a wanted man, and the regulators have placed a bounty on him. When you kill him, you can take his finger, which can be turned into Sonora Cruz for a bounty of 1,000 caps.
Who are you again?
This, by the way, is my favorite location for a player home. If you're not going to choose between the Megaton and the 10-penny one, it is a bit annoying to get to sometimes, but it's definitely got all the storage you need. You can decorate the place up a little bit. There's also a Lincoln shrine for some reason. It's decoration. To the south of here is the Mama Dulce factory. As you get close to it, you are then given a new radio frequency. Here is where you can find a Chinese woman spouting propaganda about America's propaganda.
All peace-loving peoples must join together to stop the war of aggression being waged by the Wall Street gang.
Inside is a platoon of remnant Chinese soldiers from all the way back in the pre-war era. I guess they didn't get the memo that the bombs were going to drop. It appears that the Mama Dulce factory was a front for a Chinese espionage, and it would have been a base of operations for them. This is a perfect place for any Chinese weaponry, so if you use the Chinese assault rifle a lot like I do, it is definitely worth a visit. Also, how did a car get up here? Did someone try to do some daredevil trick or something? If you follow the metro tunnels south of the Arlington National Cemetery, you'll eventually enter the Falls Church region. This is also part of the DC ruins, accessible only through the metro system. The area is divided into multiple sections, with the most prominent landmarks being the Falls Church metro station, the LOB Enterprises, and the Super Mutant occupied offices. When you first arrive at the Falls Church Metro, you'll often encounter a firefight between members of the Brotherhood of Steel and a group of Super Mutants. Paladin Hoss and another Brotherhood member are trying to reach a trapped initiate named Peck, and you can choose to help them, triggering an unmarked quest called the Lost Initiate. If you assist the Brotherhood in clearing out the Super Mutants, you're directed to an office building south of the Metro, where Peck is hiding. Or in my case, I guess I'm doing it on my own. Unfortunately, there is a good chance that these paladins will not survive, but they did mention about reaching an office south of the Metro. In that office, you'll of course find more Super Mutants, and that's where you can find Peck, if he's alive. If all the paladins are killed before you reach here, he will also be found dead, so make sure to keep at least one of the paladins still alive. If you continue exploring, you can find a large building called the LOB Enterprise, an office building that was once a weapons manufacturer before the war, and had ties to the Chinese weapon design projects such as the Zhurong V418 pistol. It is here where security robots are still guarding the facility, which were remnants of the pre-war defenses that continue to function still. You discover that the feds were actually starting to sniff around the company with suspicions of its espionage, and so every employee were forced to carry a low-grade weapon, almost as if they were training them to be like a sleeper army. It's definitely worth checking out, but the security robots will be quite intense. If we follow one of the metro tunnels out of Falls Church, we can bump into the Mason District area. The Brotherhood of Steel definitely weren't joking when they say that Super Mutants are crawling everywhere in DC. Another metro tunnel can be found nearby, all the Super Mutants patrolling in the middle. They seem to have another Wastelander captive again, so you can play hero if you like. But the real highlight of this area is the Hubris Comics. This is a pre-war publisher behind the comics such as Grognak the Barbarian, the Silver Shroud, the Unstoppables, and even Wasteland. Inside, the building has 3 main levels, all infested by feral ghouls. We have the first floor where all the magic happens, just watch out for the traps. We got the printing area where we can find a survivalist called Mad Johnny West holding out against some ghouls. He isn't very friendly, and he's probably the one most likely that's been rigging all these traps. He's also really strong as a Wastelander. In this area, you can check out the terminals, where you can find info about the antagonizer and her story. You can also try turning on the printing press, but it will just go up in smoke. It's probably most likely malfunctioned. Or, you know, maybe take this skeleton out of the machine. That might be a good start. There's also a cool mini game where you can play as Grognak in an old school text-based RPG game, which is kind of fun. And lastly, we have the basement level, where you can find even more ghouls. This place links back up to the Falls Church area, so we don't really need to do that. We're nearly done with our explorations, and all of them will be located now in the heart of the DC ruins. So let's go to the center of the city's living area, Georgetown. Being very close to the center of the DC ruins, we're going to see a concentration of super mutants, some of them having very strong firepower. Surprisingly, for such a large area, there isn't really that much in regards of other interiors. You can find a grocer nearby and a radiation king on the other side, with a trader doing some business here. Probably not the best location for a business in my opinion. Then just down the road, there is a home you can access owned by the McKellen family. Inside you can activate their home, Mr. Handy, and then order it around, which is a kind of cool feature. You can choose to go walk their dog, which of course doesn't exist anymore, and he will go out and look for it, which by the way makes it a great security robot to deal with these super mutants. Followed it around until it stopped, and then by my surprise, the dog was dead rather recently, not 200 years ago. Oh. On the other side is a super mutant with a missile launcher. Just watch out for him. The last building accessible is one that many will miss, and that's because it is hidden right next to this metro tunnel. This is the La Maison Beauregard, a very dilapidated hotel. Inside you can find some super mutants and a bit of fun loot, like these missiles and a mini nuke. Through the metro tunnels, we can eventually reach into Pennsylvania Avenue, and we have to go visit the White House. Nothing like a little bit of sightseeing. Well, it's clear that the White House was a prime target during the Great War, and the devastation shows it. There's almost nothing that remains of its original structure, which isn't surprising given its status as the home of the President of the United States. As for the President himself, he did evacuate this place long before the bombs dropped, relocating to the Poseidon oil rig, or known as Control Station Enclave. Well, would you look at that? The only way to access the White House now is through the underground tunnel, which looks like some people were doing some really cool stunts down here. Maybe it's the same guy that drove the car on the factory roof. In the tunnels, you can find a door to access the ruins of the White House, but make sure to carry some Radaway with you because there is heavy doses of radiation, including a couple of ghouls that roam around here. Interestingly though, you can find some mini nukes and a fat man. I don't know why they have that here. I did notice a weird glitch of a guy that's floating in midair, and he's carrying a couple of codes for an explosive charge set on the streets above. And to find these explosives, we need to look for some scaffolding. I'm sure that's a mod. That's definitely a mod. I've never heard that before. It seems that the Brotherhood of Steel are currently trying to hold the super mutants back from this place, starting their own little outpost, which was originally a post office pre-war. On one side, you can find the super mutants mowing down a couple of wastelanders, hiding in a truck on your arrival. And then down the road is a sewer pipe leading down to a metro tunnel. I had the good fortune to experience 2 super mutant overlords. That was great. Yeah, cool man. Further down south, you'll bump into the Metro Central, which connects to quite a few other metro stations across DC. This place leads to Georgetown, Penn Avenue, Vernon Square, and the mall. So you'll most likely be visiting here during your journeys at some point. Inside, there's more ghouls. Quite a lot of them. There was one cool feature that we did miss, which was the activation of those codes that we found on that mercenary's body. If you travel across this road, you'll find the scaffolding that was mentioned on the holotape. And if you press this button, the whole street explodes. Now that is pretty awesome. Our next location is at Vernon Square, which is also crawling with super mutants. Again, the main point of interest here is the Lady Hope Hospital, the Statesman Hotel, the Vault-Tec headquarters, and this giant crater with a rocket buried in it. And according to one of the wikis, apparently this rocket was aimed at China, but it malfunctioned and crashed here. You can also find the sewer opening, which has a high level of radiation and, of course, super mutants. It does reward you a little bit of loot inside for your troubles though. Right at one of the ends of Vernon Square is a sewer manhole, which many people do miss. It looks as if someone was using this as a home, and there's a few bits of loot here to pick up. On the opposite side of Vernon Square sits Lady Hope Hospital, which has become a stronghold for a number of super mutants. If you sneak around carefully, you can overhear a conversation between two of them. One mentions that they haven't found any green stuff, heavily implying that they are searching for more FEV virus after running out in Vault 87. This theory is reinforced by Riley, the mercenary leader, who notes that there is an unusual number of super mutants in the area, all seemingly searching for something. It would make sense for them to check the hospitals, though it's clear nothing remains here for their purposes. Inside the main patient wing, on a couple of terminals, you can find a couple of the patient's stories from the pre-war era. One mentions a man injured in an accident around the groin area with a worker. What? And another describes a patient requesting a stack of pillows only to steal them the next day. Who wrote these stories? The lower levels of the hospital lead down to the basement and the sewer tunnels, where you can witness clashes between the super mutants and the Talon Company. These tunnels connect back to DuPont region, which makes the layout quite flexible and interconnected. There are plenty of medical supplies to be found at this hospital, making this an excellent stop if you ever need some stim packs or blood packs. I don't know why you'd need blood packs, but you know, if you were role-playing as a vampire, this is the place. As you continue exploring, you'll eventually reach an open section of the building where some fallen scaffolding or foundation has created a makeshift bridge to the Statesman Hotel, providing a very convenient connection between the two areas. Originally, this was a luxury hotel catering for rich clientele, but now it has been overrun by super mutants. Scattered throughout the place are dead super mutants, remnants of a previous battle. Your goal is to reach the top of the hotel where a small group of mercenaries are trapped. They have been fighting their way up to the rooftops, and now you must do the same. Along the way there is an Easter egg and several items to notice, for example the Moonbeam holotape, which belongs to Sydney's father. Had Sydney survived the ordeal, if you give this holotape to her, she will give you her SMG. You'll also notice a skeleton who seems to have OD'd on Nuka-Colas before being incinerated. And lastly, for you artist enthusiasts, there is a skeleton that has been posed exactly like the French painting of the death of Marat. On your ascent to the rooftops, you'll come across a body with an ammo case. This belongs to a merc named Theo, who has been killed while moving up with his group. The ammo box is unfortunately locked and even requires a code, and that can only be obtained once you bypass the super mutants and reach to the top. Once you're there, you can find the remnants of that merc group where they're making their final stand among the scattered super mutant bodies. Talking to them reveals that they are mapping parts of the DC ruins before being ambushed by a super mutant horde. Considering there were only 5 of them, it's pretty understandable that they ended up pinned on the rooftop with limited ammunition. You can help them out by giving them some ammo or giving the ammo from the ammo box. You can share the supplies with the team. All they need now is a fission battery to repair the elevator, so they can return to the lobby. There is a good chance that some of these mercs will die, because even though they have unique combat armour, it's just not enough against multiple super mutant masters. Those who do survive will thank you and provide you a marker to their base in Seward Square. Before heading there though, there is still a couple of locations nearby that are left to explore, including the Vault-Tec headquarters on the opposite side of the area. Vault-Tec are considered the big bad guy in the Fallout franchise, considering majority of the vaults were mere human experiments. They quickly became the biggest company in America, with the help of the government funding them to make the vaults across America. This Vault-Tec headquarters worked on the division around DC and the neighbouring states. Upon entering the building, you'll notice a few super mutants who have wandered inside, but the security robots are effectively keeping them in check. The headquarters is divided into 3 main sections: the guest relations area, the corporate offices, and the administration level, which is the most important. It is here that you can access the Master Brain and the mainframe containing Vault-Tec's data on all the vaults and their locations. Several terminals can also reveal the harsh working conditions for the Vault-Tec employees, such as reducing bathroom breaks by mere seconds and docking pay for any requesting Vault-Tec merchandise. Now, while this location could have been a treasure trove for lore given the Vault-Tec's notorious history, it feels somewhat underdeveloped. The loot is quite minimal, there's just like a Nuka-Cola Quantum and a few skill books, and its main primary purpose is to discover the Vault's locations throughout the region. Maybe Bethesda didn't know where to take Vault-Tec and its storyline, so maybe they wanted to keep it quite vague. The next stop in the exploration is to Tacoma Park, tucked away on the edge of the DC ruins. Originally, this place was a mix of a shopping center and an industrial site, where we can see plenty of shops that were used before the Great War. Unfortunately, now it has been taken over by super mutants, with the Talon Company taking an interest in the industrial area. As we leave the station, you'll be approached by a couple of super mutants with high-grade weaponry, and standing near these cars is a really bad move. If you keep going up, you'll eventually find the Tacoma industrial site, where a couple of the Talon Company are fighting some super mutants. The main factory is an Abraxo cleaner factory, where the super mutants have also taken it over. In the back area, we can find a couple of dead wastelanders in radiation suits, and according to a holotape, they were researching on some feral ghouls. Pretty stupid idea, wasn't it? Lastly, at the end, we can find another one of those super mutant behemoths. Luckily, the Talon Company have left a nice switch for you to send an artillery strike on the area, which will help damage this thing. You just might need to finish it off. There is a small garage to check out before finishing up this area. With only a few locations left, I should probably check out one of the biggest locations, which is the Capitol building. What used to be an influential place for American politics has now been reduced to a war zone between the super mutants and the Talon Company. You can, of course, get involved in this and have some fun shooting up the place. Even the Enclave got involved. They just failed miserably. Inside the Capitol building, the war continues. This place just feels like a straight up free-for-all deathmatch. Somehow even a super mutant behemoth got inside, so you know you had to use that Fat Man on it. Now that is fucking cool. You can check out the other rooms too, like the Hall of Columns and the Conference Hall. But what I find most disappointing about all of this is that there is just no missions regarding this place. Not even a clear out the super mutant type mission. I don't know what they were thinking, but they really missed out on doing something special with this place. The loot isn't even that impressive either. It's mainly a bunch of skill books laying around. It's really quite disappointing, really. You can eventually lead to the back, where you're at the Seward Square area. It seems that the battle is ongoing with the Talon Company, looking to take that Capitol building, using this area as their main line of attack. Or well, they were going to use it. Near one of the stations, you can actually access the office building, which allows you to reach the top where Sniper was using it for a good view of the place. If you reach this place, some mercs and submutants will spawn, and you can use the artillery close by to kill them. Further into Seward Square, we can plainly see that it's still ran by super mutants, which is quite funny because further on, you can eventually hear this insane preacher where he screams out about the world ending, and all these super mutants just don't seem to care. I could just imagine the conversation. No, the damn preacher is doing it again. I'm getting angry. Oh, cut that out. Yeah, cut that out. You can actually speak to a Wastelander and convince him to go shut him up, which will lead to a massive explosion. It's probably because of all the mini nukes around. I just checked the wiki to see if the preacher had any lore around him, and I just got a couple of these photos imaged like it was some sort of vacation. So what did you do today? Well, Lastly, on the other side of Seward Square, an Enclave vertibird will come into play, but I was having none of it, to be honest. Tucked away at the end of the square is the Ranger Compound, home to Riley's Rangers, the surviving group you helped on the Statesman Hotel rooftop. Their leader, Riley, can be found in Underworld, having been wounded while seeking help. And with only 7 members, it's clear that this is a relatively new mercenary group. Unlike the Talon Company, these Rangers follow a strict moral code, taking in contracts that only benefit the people rather than harm them. Their current mission is to map out the DC area and its surroundings, which is when they were ambushed. Speaking to Riley allows you to join their efforts and be rewarded. She offers a unique minigun or the combat armor with some special bonuses on it, which increases your luck and action points. Additionally, she provides you a geomapper, letting you actively assist their group while earning payment for your work. Unfortunately, there is no grand reward for discovering every location. Next up is L'Enfant Plaza, the last part of DC that was previously missed. The only way to reach this area is through one of the mall metro stations, which leads to the final DC Ruins location. This wide open area contains a wide mix of buildings, from cafes to offices to the suburban style houses. This location is fairly busy and quite iconic, featuring the Louvre style glass pyramid in the center, which was later removed in real life DC in 2013. The area is essentially now a war zone, with submutants roaming freely and the Enclave joining the fight halfway through, adding just more chaos. This whole area kind of feels like a bit of a battlefield to explore. And the only accessible building in this entire area is the Capitol Post. Inside you can find newspapers reporting historical events that have been frozen in time, such as the victory of Anchorage, the food riots, the development of a super weapon, and even the annexation of Canada. There's also a fresh corpse of Gibson, a reference to Hideo Kojima's game Snatcher. On Gibson's body is a key that is used at the house in Minefield to unlock a model home and collect some loot. Yep, that was totally worth it, wasn't it? On to our last location now, being the Irradiated Metro. There's really not much to say about this place really, apart from this location being mildly irradiated. And of course you've got ghouls inside. It does look like some people were trying to settle here, as we can find a couple of dead wastelanders, but that's really about it. We did come at a bit of an awkward time considering all the Enclave barriers around, so let's just finish up the game. But there was just one thing I wanted to finish up, which was to get the Vault 87 marker, because it's basically impossible to reach the location due to its extremely high radiation. Like, this place goes up to 3,000 radiation per second. After a couple of tries, you can actually mark it. Just don't bother looting the body or anything, and the door is inaccessible. All that's left now is to go back to the Citadel, let Liberty Prime blow up some commies, jump into Project Purity, shoot Autumn so he never comes back, and activate Project Purity. Thank you all so much for watching. This has definitely been a long one, so I appreciate you sticking around. Thank you to my patrons as well for keeping me awake during these editing sessions. And if you would like to support, head on by to the Patreon where I offer a lot of exclusive content. And I will see you in the next video.